Kodiak bear kills 3 fishermen on shoreline. October 27th, 2024. The morning mist clung to Uyak Bay like a shroud, transforming the rugged coastline of Kodiak Island into something primordial and haunting. Samuel Rivera adjusted his polarized sunglasses as he guided their 18-foot aluminum boat through the slate-grey waters, the 115-horsepower Yamaha outboard purring steadily behind him. At 41, Sam had been fishing these waters for over 2 decades, ever since his father Miguel first brought him to Alaska as a 19-year-old college dropout seeking purpose in the wilderness. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders as he navigated toward their planned fishing spot near the mouth of Uyak Creek, where decades of salmon runs had carved deep pools perfect for holding coho and late-season silvers. "Weather's supposed to hold through Tuesday," called out his younger brother Jacob from the bow, his voice carrying over the steady thrum of the engine. Jacob Rivera, 39 and perpetually optimistic despite a recent divorce that had left him financially devastated, was scanning the horizon with Bushnell marine binoculars, searching for the telltale signs of feeding birds that would indicate schooling fish beneath the surface. He wore his lucky green baseball cap, faded from years of sun exposure, and the same Carhartt jacket he'd owned since his commercial fishing days in Bristol Bay. The jacket bore testament to countless fishing trips: a small tear on the left elbow from a halibut hook, faded bloodstains from gutting salmon, and the permanent odor of salt spray and fish slime that no amount of washing could eliminate. Thomas Gray sat amidships, methodically organizing their tackle box with the precision that had made him a successful civil engineer back in Portland, Oregon. At 43, Tom represented the methodical counterpart to the Rivera brothers' more intuitive approach to fishing. His carefully catalogued collection of lures, weights, and hooks reflected 15 years of serious sport fishing throughout the Pacific Northwest. Tom had met Sam during a guided fishing trip on the Columbia River in 2019, and their shared obsession with pursuing trophy salmon had evolved into an annual pilgrimage to increasingly remote Alaskan waters. This trip to Kodiak represented the culmination of 2 years of planning, research, and careful saving of vacation days from his position at Morrison Engineering and Associates. The 3 men had flown into Kodiak on Alaska Airlines Flight 66 3 days earlier, on October 24, 2024, their gear packed into oversized duffel bags and hard-sided rifle cases that drew knowing nods from fellow passengers who recognized the unmistakable signs of serious Alaskan adventurers. They'd rented the boat from Kodiak Marina Services, a family-owned operation run by 4th-generation Kodiak resident Marcus Peterson, whose grandfather had established the business in 1952. Marcus, a weathered 58-year-old with hands like leather and eyes the color of winter seas, had provided a thorough briefing on local conditions, tidal patterns, and most importantly, bear safety protocols that seemed almost routine in their delivery. "You boys know about our brown bears, I assume," Marcus had said while completing the rental paperwork, his tone carrying the weight of someone who had delivered this warning countless times. "We've got the largest concentration of brown bears in the world right here on Kodiak. Some of the big boars can push 1,500 pounds, and they're not particularly afraid of humans. Salmon runs bring them right down to the shoreline, especially this time of year when they're packing on weight for winter denning." He had handed Sam a laminated card with emergency contact numbers and bear safety guidelines. "Most important thing is food storage and situational awareness. Bears can smell fish from miles away, and cleaning fish on the beach is like ringing a dinner bell." Sam had nodded seriously, though privately he felt confident in their preparations. He'd hunted black bears in the Cascades and had read extensively about brown bear behavior, Their camp setup included a bear-proof food storage system, electric fence perimeter around their sleeping area, and each man carried a .300 Winchester Magnum rifle with 200-grain Nosler partition bullets specifically chosen for their proven performance on large game. Tom had spent hours at the range ensuring his marksmanship was solid, while Jacob, despite his easygoing nature, was arguably the best shot among them, having grown up hunting elk and deer in the rugged terrain of eastern Oregon. Their base camp was established on a gravel beach approximately 2 miles southwest of Uyak Bay's main fishing lodge, a spot Sam had identified using satellite imagery and topographical maps during months of pre-trip planning. The location offered excellent access to salmon-holding water while maintaining what appeared to be safe distance from the heavily traveled bear corridors along the main creek systems. Their 3-season REI Kingdom 8 tent was positioned on elevated ground approximately 100 yards back from the high tide line, with clear sightlines in all directions and easy access to their Alumacraft boat pulled well above the storm tide mark. The camping equipment represented a significant investment in quality gear designed for Alaskan conditions. Their sleep systems consisted of Patagonia 850 fill-down sleeping bags rated to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, paired with Thermarest Neo-Air sleeping pads that provided insulation from the cold ground. Cooking was accomplished using a Jetboil Genesis base camp stove system that could handle large meals and boil water efficiently, even in harsh conditions. Most critically, their food storage system consisted of 2 Yeti Tundra 75 coolers that were secured inside a portable electric fence perimeter powered by a deep-cycle marine battery, a setup that had proven effective in bear country throughout Alaska and western Canada. Each man carried comprehensive safety equipment, including GPS units with emergency beacons, marine VHF radios, first aid supplies, and bear spray in addition to their rifles. Sam's Garmin InReach Explorer allowed two-way satellite communication from anywhere on the island, providing both emergency rescue capability and to send status updates to their families back home. The device had been a birthday gift from his wife Maria, who had initially opposed the trip but eventually supported it after extracting promises about daily check-ins and detailed safety protocols. Maria Rivera had married Sam 18 years earlier, shortly after his return from a 2-year stint working on a fishing boat in the Bering Sea. She was a pediatric nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center, a profession that had made her acutely aware of how quickly outdoor adventures could transform into medical emergencies. Her concerns about the Kodiak trip were grounded in professional experience treating trauma victims and personal knowledge of Sam's tendency toward overconfidence in wilderness situations. "You're not 20 anymore," she had reminded him during their final conversation before his departure. "Promise me you'll be extra careful, especially around those bears." Jacob's ex-wife Rachel had been less supportive, viewing the expensive fishing trip as another example of her former husband's misplaced priorities, during a period when he should have been focused on rebuilding his finances and establishing stability for their 2 teenage children. The divorce had been finalized only 6 months earlier, and Jacob was still adjusting to the loneliness of his small apartment in McMinnville, Oregon, where he worked as a maintenance supervisor for the city's water treatment facility. This trip represented both an escape from his troubles and a connection to happier times when the Rivera brothers had fished together regularly with their father before Miguel's death from lung cancer in 2018. Tom's wife Jennifer had been characteristically practical about the expedition, helping him organize gear and ensuring his life insurance policies were current while maintaining her usual supportive attitude toward his outdoor pursuits. As a nurse practitioner specializing in emergency medicine, Jennifer understood both the risks and the psychological benefits of challenging outdoor adventures. She had made Tom promise to send daily updates via his satellite communicator, and had programmed emergency contact numbers into his GPS unit, including the direct line to the Coast Guard Rescue Coordination Center in Juneau. Their first 2 days of fishing had exceeded all expectations, with consistent action on coho salmon in the 8 to 12-pound range, along with several impressive chum salmon that provided spectacular battles on their 8-weight fly rods. The weather had been remarkably cooperative for late October, with daytime temperatures reaching the mid-40s and only light precipitation during the overnight hours. Visibility remained excellent throughout both days, allowing them to explore different sections of the bay and identify the most productive fishing areas for their remaining time on the island. October 26th had been particularly productive, yielding 14 keeper-sized salmon that now filled both of their ice-packed coolers and would provide months of premium table fare for their families. The fishing had been so consistent that they'd stopped by 2 p.m. to avoid exceeding their cooler capacity, spending the remainder of the afternoon exploring tidal pools and photographing the dramatic scenery that made Kodiak Island legendary among outdoor photographers. Tom had captured over 300 digital images using his Canon EOS R5 camera system, including several shots of distant brown bears feeding on salmon carcasses along the far shore of the bay. The bears had been visible through binoculars throughout both fishing days, mostly individual animals working the productive sections of creek mouth, where spawning salmon concentrated before entering the freshwater systems. The closest bear sighting had occurred on October 25th, when a medium-sized sow with 2 cubs had appeared on the beach approximately 400 yards from their fishing position. Sam had watched the family group through his spotting scope, noting the methodical way the mother bear taught her cubs to identify and catch spawning salmon in the shallow water near the creek entrance. "She's got the whole system figured out," Sam had observed, passing the spotting scope to his companions. "Waits for the salmon to move into that shallow riffle where they can't maneuver easily, then she wades in and pins them against the gravel with her claws. Cubs are learning the technique by watching and imitating her movements." The bear family had remained visible for nearly 2 hours, providing an exceptional wildlife viewing opportunity that Tom documented extensively with his telephoto lens. The presence of bears had necessitated constant vigilance during their shore-based activities, particularly when cleaning fish or preparing meals. Their standard protocol involved one person maintaining watch with binoculars while the others worked, with loaded rifles positioned within arm's reach and bear spray attached to their belt systems. They had practiced their response to a bear encounter multiple times, establishing clear roles and communication signals that would allow them to react quickly and effectively if a dangerous situation developed. Evening camp routines had become systematic and efficient, refined through 2 nights of practice and adjustment. Fish cleaning was accomplished immediately upon return to shore, with all organic waste disposed of in deep water at least 50 yards from their camp perimeter. Cooking and eating occurred within the electric fence boundary, with all food items secured in the bear-proof coolers before darkness fell. Personal hygiene items, including toothpaste and soap, were stored with the food to prevent attracting bears with scented products. Their conversations around the camp stove had covered the usual topics of middle-aged men temporarily freed from domestic responsibilities, work frustrations, family dynamics, shared memories of previous fishing adventures, and plans for future trips to even more remote locations. Tom had been researching possibilities in the Brooks Range for chasing Arctic char and grayling, while Jacob dreamed of a salmon fishing expedition to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, a trip that remained financially out of reach, but provided pleasant fantasy material during long evenings in camp. Sam had been more focused on the immediate experience, savoring the rare opportunity to spend extended time with his brother and best friend in one of the most spectacular wilderness settings in North America. His responsibilities as a construction foreman for a large Portland area contractor meant that trips longer than a weekend were rare, making this 5-day Kodiak adventure particularly precious. He had already begun planning their 2025 expedition, potentially targeting the famous rainbow trout fishing in the Bristol Bay region, or the incredible king salmon runs in southeast Alaska. October 27th dawned clear and cold, with surface water temperatures in the low 40s and air temperatures hovering near freezing. The weather forecast called for increasing clouds throughout the day, with possible light precipitation beginning in the late afternoon, conditions that often triggered increased salmon movement and correspondingly active fishing. Their plan involved launching at first light to take advantage of the incoming tide and morning bite period that had been so productive during their previous days on the water. Sam completed his pre-launch inspection of the boat and motor, while Jacob and Tom secured their gear and organized tackle for the day's fishing. The routine had become familiar. Life jackets checked and properly fitted, emergency equipment verified and accessible, fuel level confirmed adequate for their planned fishing areas, plus reserve for unexpected situations. The VHF radio crackled with the voices of other early rising anglers, reporting conditions and sharing information about fish locations, an informal network that had helped them identify productive areas during their first day on the water. At 6:45 a.m., Sam pulled the starter cord on the Yamaha outboard, the engine catching immediately and settling into its familiar idle rhythm. Jacob pushed the bow off the gravel beach while Tom handled the stern line, both men wading through the shocking cold of the near-shore water to get the boat floating free. The familiar routine of launching had become second nature, each man knowing his role and executing it efficiently despite the early hour and cold conditions. Their first fishing location was a deep pool, approximately half a mile southwest of camp, where the previous day's exploration had revealed good numbers of salmon staging before their final spawning runs. The depth finder showed 28 feet of water, with a distinct thermocline at 15 feet, ideal conditions for salmon holding in the warmer, deeper water, while making periodic feeding forays toward the surface. Tom rigged his fly rod with a chartreuse and white Clouser minnow, while Jacob opted for a more traditional setup, using a buzz bomb lure in chrome and blue coloration. The fishing started immediately, with Jacob hooking a bright coho salmon on his third cast. The fish ran hard toward deep water, stripping line from his reel in the characteristic screaming run that made coho salmon famous among sport fishermen. After a 10-minute battle that showcased the salmon's acrobatic abilities, Jacob brought the fish to the boat, where Sam administered the killing blow and placed it in their ice-filled fish box. The salmon was in perfect condition, bright silver with minimal spawning colors, indicating it was fresh from the ocean and would provide excellent table fare. Tom connected with his first fish 15 minutes later, a larger coho that immediately demonstrated why these salmon were considered among the premier sport fish in Alaskan waters. The battle lasted nearly 20 minutes, with the fish making multiple spectacular jumps and long, powerful runs that tested both Tom's equipment and his technique. When finally brought to the boat, the salmon measured 28 inches and appeared to weigh close to 12 pounds, an exceptional fish by any standard. By 10 a.m., they had landed 8 keeper-sized salmon and released several smaller fish that hadn't reached full maturity. The action had been consistent enough to keep all 3 men actively engaged, with hookups occurring regularly and multiple double hookups testing their ability to manage fighting fish simultaneously. The camaraderie and excitement of consistent fishing action created the kind of shared experience that would be remembered and retold for years to come. Sam noticed the first signs of changing weather conditions around 10:30 a.m., when the wind shifted from offshore to onshore and began building small whitecaps across the bay. Cloud cover was increasing from the southwest, suggesting the approaching weather system was ahead of schedule. While not immediately dangerous, the conditions indicated they should consider heading back to camp earlier than originally planned to avoid being caught in rough water with a heavily loaded boat. "Weather's building faster than expected," Sam called over the increasing wind noise. "Probably should think about heading back in an hour or so, give ourselves plenty of time to get these fish cleaned and secured before it gets nasty." The forecast had called for winds increasing to 25 knots, with gusts to 35, conditions that would make their small boat uncomfortable and potentially dangerous for inexperienced operators. Jacob was in the middle of fighting another salmon when Sam made the weather observation, his attention focused on maintaining proper line tension and preventing the fish from fouling their anchor line. The salmon was making a strong run toward deeper water, bending his medium-heavy spinning rod nearly double and causing his drag system to sing under the pressure. These moments of intense concentration and physical engagement represented the essence of what drew them to salmon fishing, despite the expense and logistical challenges of reaching remote Alaskan waters. Tom had switched to a large spoon lure in silver and green, a pattern that had proven effective during the previous afternoon when the salmon had been less aggressive toward fly patterns. His first cast with the new lure resulted in an immediate hookup with what felt like a significantly larger fish, possibly one of the Jack Chinook salmon that occasionally appeared in these waters during late fall. The initial run was so powerful, it nearly pulled the rod from his hands, requiring him to quickly tighten his drag and brace himself against the boat's gunwale. The fish that emerged from the depths during its first jump was indeed a Chinook salmon, though smaller than the massive kings that made Alaska famous among salmon fishermen. At approximately 15 pounds, it was still a formidable opponent on Tom's medium-weight tackle, providing the kind of sustained battle that separated Chinook salmon from their smaller cousins. The fight continued for over 25 minutes, with the salmon making multiple deep runs and several spectacular jumps that showcased its incredible power and determination. By 11:15 a.m., increasing wind and wave conditions were making boat control more challenging, particularly when fighting fish or attempting to land them. Sam made the decision to head back to camp while they could still navigate safely, recognizing that conditions would only continue to deteriorate throughout the afternoon. Their coolers contained 11 excellent salmon, more than enough to provide meals for their families, while leaving several fish to share with neighbors and friends back home. The return trip to camp required careful attention to wave timing and boat loading, as their stern was riding lower than ideal due to the weight of fish, ice and gear accumulated during 3 days of successful fishing. Sam adjusted their course to take the waves at a slight angle rather than heading directly into them, a technique that provided a more comfortable ride while maintaining safe boat handling characteristics. The crossing took nearly 40 minutes, significantly longer than the 20-minute outbound trip earlier that morning. Jacob and Tom secured gear and organized their fish cleaning station, while Sam pulled the boat well above the high tide line and tilted the outboard motor to prevent prop damage from the increasingly rough surf. Their fish cleaning setup consisted of a folding aluminum table positioned on the gravel beach approximately 30 yards from their tent site, with a dedicated wash station and organized knife storage that had been refined during their previous days in camp. The process of cleaning 11 salmon was substantial work, requiring nearly 2 hours of concentrated effort, during which the men took turns filleting fish, while the others maintained security watch for approaching bears. Their system had proven effective during previous sessions. One person cleaned fish, while another maintained watch with binoculars, and the third organized cleaned fillets in their coolers with fresh ice. The work was methodical and efficient, though the increasing wind made conditions uncomfortable and heightened their awareness of approaching weather. Sam was working on filleting their largest coho salmon, a magnificent fish that had fought exceptionally hard and would provide 4 generous meal-sized portions for his family, when Tom first noticed movement in the tree line approximately 100 yards south of their position. Initially dismissed as wind-blown vegetation, the movement pattern was too consistent and purposeful to be caused by natural conditions. Tom raised his binoculars and focused on the area, immediately identifying the distinctive brown coloration and massive bulk that could only mean one thing. "We've got a bear," Tom announced quietly, his voice carrying the controlled tension that indicated immediate danger rather than casual wildlife observation. "Big one, maybe 200 yards south of us, moving along the tree line parallel to the beach." He continued watching through his binoculars while Sam and Jacob immediately stopped their fish-cleaning activities and looked toward their rifles, which were positioned against a piece of driftwood approximately 10 feet from their cleaning station. The bear was a mature male, easily identifiable by its massive size and distinctive hump of muscle above its shoulders that distinguished brown bears from their black bear cousins. Tom estimated its weight at over 1,000 pounds, based on its apparent body mass and the way it moved through the coastal vegetation with surprising grace despite its enormous size. The animal appeared to be following scent trails, likely attracted by the combination of fresh salmon blood, fish-cleaning waste, and the strong odors associated with their 3 days of successful fishing. "He's definitely aware of us," Tom continued his narration while maintaining visual contact with the bear, "moving deliberately in our direction, but not in any kind of direct approach pattern. Probably trying to figure out what we are and whether we represent a threat to whatever food source he's identified." The bear's behavior was consistent with documented brown bear investigative patterns, showing caution but persistent interest in potential food opportunities. Sam quietly moved toward their rifles, his movements slow and deliberate to avoid triggering a charge response from the approaching bear. The 3 Winchester Model 70 rifles were loaded with 200-grain Nosler partition bullets, proven performers on large game that would penetrate deeply and expand reliably even on the heaviest brown bears. Sam had practiced extensively with his rifle and was confident in his ability to make accurate shots under pressure, though he desperately hoped the situation wouldn't require lethal force. Jacob began securing their fish-cleaning operation, moving cleaned salmon fillets into their coolers and eliminating the blood and scent sources that were attracting the bear's attention. The process required careful balance between efficiency and avoiding sudden movements that might trigger an aggressive response. Years of hunting experience had taught him that predatory animals often interpreted rapid movements as either threat displays or prey behavior, both of which could escalate a dangerous situation. The bear emerged from the tree line into full view, approximately 150 yards from their position, revealing its true massive proportions and the distinctive silver-tipped fur that marked it as one of Kodiak Island's legendary giant brown bears. Its head appeared enormous even at distance, with small ears that looked disproportionately tiny compared to the massive skull and powerful jaw structure. The animal's movements were fluid and confident, showing none of the nervous energy typical of bears uncertain about human presence. "This guy's been around people before," Sam observed while chambering a round in his rifle. "Look how comfortable he is in the open. Most wild bears would stay in cover until they figured out what we are." The bear's body language suggested experience with human encounters and possibly previous access to human food sources, a combination that made it significantly more dangerous than a truly wild bear with natural fear of humans. Tom maintained his observation post with binoculars while his companions prepared defensive positions and secured potential attractants. The bear had stopped approximately 100 yards away and was testing the air with its sensitive nose, clearly detecting the strong scent of fresh salmon blood and fish-cleaning waste despite their efforts to minimize attractive odors. Its behavior suggested it was making decisions about approach strategies and assessing the risk-reward ratio of investigating their camp more closely. The standoff continued for nearly 10 minutes, with the bear occasionally moving closer, but never in a direct approach pattern that would have triggered immediate defensive action. Instead, it appeared to be circling their position at a respectful distance, gathering scent information and observing their behavior patterns. This methodical approach was more concerning than an immediate charge would have been, as it suggested intelligence and experience rather than simple predatory aggression. Wind direction was working in their favor, carrying their scent away from the bear while bringing the animal's strong, musky odor clearly to their position. The smell was unmistakable to anyone who had encountered large bears previously, a combination of wild animal musk, salmon, and the particular sweetness that marked a well-fed brown bear preparing for winter denning. The strength of the scent indicated the animal was much closer than it appeared through binoculars. "He's testing us," Jacob observed, while maintaining his position near their pile of cleaned fish. "Trying to figure out if we're going to defend this food source or abandon it if he applies pressure. We need to make it clear we're not backing down, but without triggering an actual confrontation." The psychological aspects of bear encounters were well documented, with many situations resolved through clear communication of intentions rather than physical force. Sam activated his inReach satellite communicator and composed a brief message to their emergency contacts. "Large brown bear near camp, situation under control but monitoring closely. Will update in 30 minutes. The device confirmed message transmission, ensuring their families and emergency services would be aware of the developing situation, even if communications were interrupted by more serious developments. The bear's behavior suddenly changed, from investigative to more purposeful, with its movement pattern shifting from the parallel circling approach to a more direct path toward their cleaning station. The change was subtle but unmistakable to experienced outdoorsmen who understood predator behavior patterns. Tom immediately noted the shift in body language and posture that indicated escalating interest in their food sources rather than simple curiosity about human presence. "He's made his decision," Tom announced while maintaining visual contact through his binoculars. "Coming in more directly now, probably testing our response to see if we're going to defend our position or retreat." The bear was now approximately 75 yards away and moving with the purposeful gait that suggested it had decided the potential food reward was worth the risk of closer human contact. All three men now held their rifles in ready positions while maintaining formation around their fish cleaning station and coolers. Their plan, discussed extensively during pre-trip preparation, involved coordinating their defensive response to present a unified front while avoiding the crossfire situations that had resulted in friendly fire incidents during previous documented bear encounters. Sam would take the primary shot if lethal force became necessary, with Jacob and Tom providing backup and covering different approach angles. The bear stopped at 50 yards, well within effective rifle range, but still maintaining what appeared to be a cautious assessment of the situation. At this distance, its massive size was truly impressive, with its shoulder height exceeding that of a large horse and its weight clearly exceeding their original estimates. The animal's eyes were intelligent and calculating, showing none of the vacant expression typical of purely instinct-driven wildlife encounters. "Look at the size of his head," Jacob whispered while maintaining his rifle position. "That skull has got to be 30 inches long. This is definitely one of the legendary Kodiak giants we read about." Brown bear skull measurements were used by wildlife biologists to age and assess the health of individual animals, with the largest specimens representing decades of successful survival in harsh Alaskan conditions. The psychological pressure of the standoff was beginning to affect all three men. though their years of hunting experience provided the mental framework necessary to maintain tactical discipline under extreme stress. Heart rates were elevated and adrenaline was flowing, but their responses remained controlled and coordinated. Tom's hands were rock steady on his rifle despite the internal tension, while Jacob maintained excellent situational awareness of potential escape routes and backup positions. Sam made the decision to attempt vocal communication with the bear, a technique recommended by wildlife experts for establishing human dominance and potentially deterring aggressive behavior without resorting to lethal force. "Hey, bear," he called in a loud, firm voice. "We're here. Move along." His tone was authoritative but not aggressive, designed to communicate strength without triggering defensive responses from the animal. The bear's reaction was immediate and concerning. Instead of showing the typical startle response and retreat pattern expected from vocal warnings, the animal actually moved closer while maintaining direct eye contact with the three men. This behavior was consistent with food-conditioned bears that had learned to associate human presence with food opportunities rather than danger, a pattern that made them significantly more dangerous in wilderness encounters. "That's not the response we wanted," Tom observed, while tracking the bear through his rifle scope. "He's associating us with food rather than seeing us as a threat. This guy has definitely been around fishing camps before." Food-conditioned bears represented the most dangerous encounters for wilderness travelers, as they had lost their natural fear of humans while retaining their predatory instincts and massive physical capabilities. The distance had closed to approximately 30 yards, well within the critical zone, where brown bear charges could cover the remaining ground in under 2 seconds. At this range, their rifles would be effective, but would require immediate, accurate shot placement to stop a charging bear before it reached their position. All three men were experienced marksmen, but shooting at a moving target under extreme stress presented challenges that were impossible to replicate during range practice. Jacob noticed the bear's ears had flattened against its skull, a body language signal that indicated increasing agitation and possible preparation for aggressive action. "Ears are back," he reported quietly. "This might be about to get serious." The combination of flattened ears, direct staring, and continued approach represented a clear escalation in threat level that required immediate defensive preparation. Sam raised his rifle to shooting position while continuing to maintain vocal contact with the approaching bear. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice carrying across the beach with unmistakable authority. "Get out of here!" The rifle was chambered and ready, with the safety positioned for immediate use if the situation deteriorated further. His shooting position was stable and his sight picture clear, though he continued to hope the bear would respond to vocal warnings and retreat to a safe distance. The bear's response was to stand on its hind legs, revealing its true massive proportions as it reached a height approaching 9 feet. From this position, it could assess the situation more completely while demonstrating its overwhelming size advantage over the three men. Standing bears were not necessarily preparing to attack, but the behavior indicated heightened awareness and decision-making about the most appropriate response to the human presence. "Jesus Christ," Jacob whispered while maintaining his rifle position. "Look at the size of that thing. It's like a small building." Nay. The bear's standing position revealed the full extent of its massive chest and shoulder development, muscle groups that provided the incredible strength necessary to catch salmon, dig winter dens, and survive in the harsh Kodiak Island environment. Its claws were clearly visible and appeared to exceed 4 inches in length, capable of inflicting devastating damage with minimal effort. Tom was calculating angles and distances while maintaining visual contact through his rifle scope, preparing for the possibility of defensive shooting while hoping the situation could still be resolved without violence. "If he charges, wait until he's committed, and then we all shoot together," he advised quietly. Don't shoot too early and give him a chance to veer off or change direction. Coordinated defensive shooting was essential to ensure stopping power while avoiding the confusion and potential friendly fire risks associated with panic shooting. The bear dropped back to all four legs and began moving in a semicircle around their position, clearly evaluating approach options while maintaining close proximity to their food sources. This behavior pattern was extremely concerning, as it suggested tactical thinking and planning rather than simple, opportunistic food seeking. Wildlife biologists had documented similar behavior in problem bears that had learned to systematically raid human food sources through careful observation and planning. "He's looking for the best approach angle," Sam observed while tracking the animal with his rifle. "This isn't random behavior. He's got a plan." The realization that they were dealing with an intelligent predator rather than a simple food-seeking animal fundamentally changed the dynamics of their situation. Tactical bears required different defensive strategies and presented significantly higher risks to human safety. The bear completed its circling movement and positioned itself between their camp and their boat, effectively cutting off their primary escape route while maintaining access to their fish cleaning station. The tactical positioning was unmistakably deliberate and demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human behavior patterns and likely responses to bear pressure. This level of intelligence made the animal exponentially more dangerous than typical wilderness bear encounters. "We're cut off from the boat," Jacob reported, while maintaining his defensive position. "If this goes bad, we're going to have to stand and fight because we don't have anywhere to run." The elimination of escape options forced them into a purely defensive posture, where their only option was successful use of lethal force if the bear decided to press its attack. The psychological pressure of having no retreat option was intense, but had to be managed to maintain effective defensive capabilities. The wind was beginning to shift, carrying their scent directly toward the bear, while reducing their ability to monitor the animal's exact location through smell. Weather conditions were deteriorating as the predicted storm system approached, adding environmental stress to an already dangerous situation. Visibility was decreasing as cloud cover thickened and the first light raindrops were beginning to fall, potentially affecting rifle accuracy if shooting became necessary. Tom noticed the bear had begun making subtle movements toward their fish cleaning station, advancing only a few feet at a time, but maintaining steady progress toward their position. The incremental approach was classic predatory behavior, designed to close distance without triggering immediate defensive responses from potential prey animals. "He's still coming," Tom reported. "Maybe 25 yards now and definitely focused on our fish." Sam made the decision to fire a warning shot, a technique that sometimes deterred aggressive bears while avoiding the ethical and legal complications of unnecessary lethal force. He aimed well above the bear's position and fired a single round, the sharp crack of the .300 Winchester Magnum echoing across the beach and temporarily drowning out the sound of increasing wind and surf. The muzzle blast was tremendous in the confined area, and the smell of burned powder was immediately apparent despite the offshore breeze. The bear's reaction to the warning shot was not what they had hoped for. Instead of retreating or showing startled responses, the animal actually seemed to become more focused and determined, possibly interpreting the gunshot as a challenge rather than a deterrent. Some problem bears had learned to associate gunshots with hunting activities and food availability, a conditioning that made them more rather than less likely to approach human camps and activities. "That didn't work," Jacob observed, while maintaining his shooting position. "If anything, he seems more interested now." The failure of vocal warnings and warning shots to deter the bear left them with limited options other than lethal force or abandoning their position and equipment. Neither choice was particularly appealing, But the deteriorating situation was forcing them toward more drastic measures. The bear was now within 20 yards and showing clear signs of preparation for final approach to their food sources. Its body language had shifted to the focused intensity that preceded feeding behavior, with its attention completely concentrated on their fish cleaning station and coolers. The animal was no longer showing any apparent concern about human presence, having apparently decided that the food reward was worth whatever risk the three men represented. "This is it," Sam announced while taking careful aim at the bear's chest. "He's coming for our fish and doesn't care that we're here. We can't let him get any closer." The decision to use lethal force was never taken lightly by experienced outdoorsmen, but the bear's behavior had eliminated other options. At this range, and with this level of determination, the animal posed an immediate threat to their safety. Tom and Jacob positioned themselves to provide covering fire while Sam prepared to take the primary shot. Their positioning allowed for coordinated defensive fire without creating crossfire hazards, a formation they had practiced during pre-trip preparation but never expected to use in actual combat conditions. The reality of facing a massive predator with only rifle fire for protection was far more intense than any training scenario could replicate. The bear took several more steps forward, now within 15 yards, and clearly preparing for its final approach to their position. At this distance, the animal's massive size was overwhelming, and its confident demeanor suggested it had successfully intimidated humans in similar situations previously. Its eyes remained focused on their fish rather than on the men holding rifles, indicating it viewed them as obstacles to be overcome rather than serious threats to be avoided. Sam's finger tightened on his rifle trigger as he prepared to fire the shot that would either stop the bear or trigger a life-or-death confrontation with one of North America's most powerful predators. The weight of the trigger pull felt enormous under the pressure of the moment, and his breathing technique became critical to ensure accurate shot placement on such a large and dangerous target. Years of hunting experience had prepared him for this moment, though nothing could truly simulate the psychological pressure of shooting at a 1,000-pound bear in self-defense. The bear suddenly accelerated its approach, covering the remaining distance with shocking speed that caught all three men by surprise despite their preparation and vigilance. Brown bears were capable of speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour over short distances, and their acceleration was explosive when they committed to a charge. The transition from stalking approach to full charge happened in less than 1 second, providing minimal time for the men to react to the changing threat level. Sam's first shot struck the bear center mass, the 200-grain bullet penetrating deeply into the chest cavity and causing immediate massive tissue damage. However, the animal's momentum and adrenaline carried it forward despite the mortal wound, and it continued its charge toward their position with undiminished speed and determination. Brown bears were notorious for their ability to continue fighting even after receiving wounds that would immediately incapacitate smaller animals. Jacob and Tom fired simultaneously, their bullets striking the bear in the chest and shoulder areas as it closed the final few yards to their position. The multiple impacts staggered the animal momentarily but failed to stop its forward progress, and it crashed into their fish cleaning station with tremendous force, scattering equipment and sending fish flying across the gravel beach. The impact sounded like a small explosion, with aluminum table legs crumpling and coolers being crushed under the bear's massive weight. The wounded bear thrashed violently among their equipment, its powerful claws shredding their coolers and scattering fish fillets across the beach, while its massive jaws snapped at anything within reach. Despite multiple rifle wounds, the animal remained extremely dangerous and capable of inflicting fatal injuries on anyone who came within range of its claws or teeth. All three men maintained their positions at safe distances while preparing additional shots if the bear continued to pose a threat. Sam chambered another round and prepared to fire again, but the bear's movements were becoming uncoordinated, and it was showing signs of rapid blood loss from the multiple bullet wounds. The animal had received 3 hits from high-powered rifles loaded with premium hunting ammunition, wounds that would prove fatal within minutes, even if it remained mobile for a short period. The key was maintaining safe distance until the bear was completely incapacitated. "Stay back," Tom warned, as Jacob moved closer to assess their damaged equipment. "He's not done yet. Give him more time to bleed out before we get anywhere near him." Wounded bears remained dangerous until they were completely lifeless, and approaching too early had resulted in additional casualties during previous documented encounters. Their safety protocols required maintaining safe distance until they were certain the animal posed no further threat. The bear's movements gradually became weaker as blood loss and shock began to take effect, but the process was taking longer than any of them had expected. The animal's incredible vitality and will to survive kept it mobile and potentially dangerous for nearly 10 minutes after receiving multiple fatal wounds, a sobering reminder of the incredible toughness that made brown bears legendary among big game hunters and wildlife professionals. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of careful observation from safe positions, the bear stopped moving and appeared to have expired from its wounds. Sam approached cautiously with his rifle ready, while Tom and Jacob maintained covering positions in case the animal was merely unconscious rather than actually dead. Confirming the death of such a dangerous animal required extreme caution to avoid additional casualties from premature approach. "He's dead," Sam confirmed, after checking for breathing and eye reflexes from a safe angle using a long piece of driftwood. "We can approach now, but let's stay alert in case there are other bears in the area attracted by the gunshots and blood smell." Their immediate danger had passed, but the sound of rifle fire and the strong scent of bear blood could potentially attract additional bears to investigate the disturbance. The adrenaline rush began to subside as the immediate threat ended, leaving all 3 men feeling simultaneously relieved and emotionally drained from the intense confrontation. The reality of having killed one of Kodiak Island's iconic brown bears in self-defense created mixed emotions of relief, regret, and concern about the legal and practical implications of the shooting. Alaska law clearly permitted self-defense against dangerous wildlife, but the incident would still require official reporting and investigation. Jacob activated their emergency satellite communicator to report the bear shooting to Alaska state troopers and wildlife authorities, as required by law for any brown bear killed in defense of life or property. The initial report was brief, but included their location, time of incident, and confirmation that no human injuries had occurred during the encounter. They would be required to leave the bear carcass untouched until official investigation could be completed by trained personnel. The damage to their camp and equipment was extensive, with both coolers destroyed and much of their processed fish contaminated by contact with the ground and bear fur. However, they retained enough undamaged fish for several meals, and their essential camping equipment remained intact. Most importantly, all 3 men had escaped physical injury during what could easily have been a fatal encounter with one of North America's most dangerous predators. Tom began photographing the scene for documentation purposes, as required by wildlife authorities investigating defensive bear killings. The photographs would provide important evidence about the circumstances of the encounter and help officials determine whether the shooting was justified under Alaska's self-defense statutes. The bear's massive size was even more impressive in depth, with its length exceeding 8 feet and its skull measurements indicating it was likely one of the largest bears harvested on Kodiak Island during recent years. Weather conditions continued to deteriorate throughout the afternoon, with increasing winds and precipitation making their beach camp less comfortable, but providing additional incentive to remain in position until authorities could respond to their report. The approaching storm system would likely delay official response for at least 24 hours, requiring them to maintain security over the bear carcass while dealing with increasingly challenging weather conditions. The emotional processing of their life-threatening encounter began during the long afternoon hours of waiting for official response. All three men were experienced hunters who understood the ethical and practical aspects of taking animal life, but the intensity of defending against a charging brown bear created psychological impacts that were difficult to process immediately. The knowledge that they had been seconds away from potential death or serious injury would require time and discussion to fully understand and accept. Sam composed a detailed satellite message to his wife Maria, explaining the basic facts of their encounter while emphasizing that all three men were safe and uninjured. The message was necessarily brief due to satellite communication limitations, but it would provide essential information to their families and prevent the kind of speculation and worry that could develop if they learned about the incident through official channels or media reports. Their evening meal consisted of hastily prepared salmon fillets cooked on their camp stove, a simple but satisfying dinner that seemed especially meaningful after their brush with death earlier in the day. The conversation was subdued as each man processed the day's events while monitoring weather conditions and maintaining watch for additional bears that might be attracted to the area by the scent of blood and the bear carcass. The sound of their VHF radio, crackling to life around 8 p.m., brought news that Alaska State Troopers would be responding to their location via helicopter as soon as weather conditions permitted safe flight operations. The estimated response time was 24 to 48 hours, depending on storm passage and visibility conditions, requiring them to maintain their position and security over the bear carcass until official investigation could be completed. Sleep came fitfully despite their exhaustion from the day's traumatic events, with each man taking turns on security watch throughout the night to monitor for additional bears and changing weather conditions. The sound of wind and rain against their tent fabric created a natural soundtrack that helped mask other sounds that might have indicated approaching wildlife, but also made them more dependent on visual observation during their security watches. October 28th dawned with clearing skies and diminishing winds, conditions that would allow helicopter operations to resume and bring official response to their location. Sam used their satellite communicator to confirm their status and readiness for official contact, providing GPS coordinates and landing zone information for the incoming aircraft. The arrival of Alaska State Troopers would mark the beginning of formal investigation into their defensive bear shooting. The distinctive sound of an approaching helicopter became audible around 10 a.m., growing steadily louder until a blue and white Alaska State Trooper aircraft appeared over the tree line and began circling their camp location. The pilot was clearly assessing landing options while the trooper passengers observed their camp layout and the bear carcass location through aircraft windows. Radio contact was established using their VHF marine radio, allowing coordination of landing and initial contact procedures. Trooper Sergeant Michael Davidson emerged from the helicopter accompanied by Alaska Department of Fish and Game biologist Dr. Sarah Chen, both officials experienced in investigating defensive wildlife encounters throughout Alaska. Sergeant Davidson was a 20-year veteran of rural Alaska law enforcement with extensive experience in wildlife-related incidents, while Dr. Chen specialized in brown bear biology and management issues throughout the Kodiak Island region. The initial investigation interview was conducted separately with each of the three men, allowing officials to gather independent accounts of the encounter and verify consistency in their descriptions of events leading to the defensive shooting. The process was thorough but professional, with both officials clearly experienced in handling such investigations efficiently while gathering necessary information for their reports. Dr. Chen's examination of the bear carcass confirmed that it was indeed one of the largest specimens documented in the Kodiak Island area during recent years, with preliminary measurements indicating a skull size that would likely rank among the top 10% of brown bears harvested in Alaska annually. The bear's excellent physical condition and extensive scarring suggested it was an older dominant male that had survived numerous conflicts and challenges throughout its estimated 20-year lifespan. This was definitely a mature boar that had been around people before, Dr. Chen explained while completing her field examination. Look at these old scars on his muzzle and ears. This bear had been in fights with other bears, and possibly had previous encounters with humans that didn't end badly for him. That kind of experience makes them much more dangerous because they lose their natural fear response. The bullet wound examination confirmed that all 3 shots had been potentially fatal hits, with excellent shot placement given the stress and speed of the charging bear encounter. Sergeant Davidson noted that the defensive shooting appeared to be completely justified based on the circumstances and physical evidence, though his formal report would require additional documentation and witness statements before final determination could be made. The investigation process required most of the morning, with extensive photography of the scene, detailed measurements of distances and positions, and careful documentation of the damaged equipment that supported the men's account of the encounter. Both officials praised the preparedness and tactical response of the 3 fishermen, noting that their pre-planning and coordinated defensive strategy had likely prevented injuries or fatalities during the encounter. "You guys did everything right," Sergeant Davidson concluded while completing his field notes. "Good preparation, proper equipment, coordinated response, and excellent shot placement under pressure. This is exactly how these situations should be handled when retreat isn't possible and the bear is clearly committed to accessing your food sources." The bear carcass would be removed by helicopter for additional examination and testing, as required by Alaska wildlife management protocols for all brown bears taken in defensive situations. Tissue samples would be analyzed for diseases and toxins that might have affected behavior, while skull and hide measurements would be recorded for biological research purposes. The meat would be donated to native villages in the region where bear meat was culturally significant and would not be wasted. Their remaining time on Kodiak Island passed quietly, with improved weather conditions allowing productive fishing while they processed the emotional and psychological impacts of their near-death encounter with one of Alaska's most formidable predators. The successful resolution of their dangerous situation provided a sense of accomplishment and relief, but also a deeper appreciation for the risks inherent in wilderness travel in Alaska's remote regions. The flight back to Kodiak Town on October 29th marked the end of their adventure, though the memories and psychological impacts of their bear encounter would influence their approach to wilderness travel for years to come. All 3 men had gained new respect for the power and intelligence of brown bears, while also developing confidence in their ability to respond effectively to life-threatening situations through proper preparation and coordinated action. Airport conversations with other travelers revealed that defensive bear encounters were more common than they had previously understood, with many experienced Alaska outdoorsmen sharing similar stories of close calls and successful defensive actions. Their encounter, while traumatic at the time, represented a relatively typical example of human-bear conflicts in areas where food sources attracted both species to the same locations. The return flight to Portland provided time for reflection and discussion about their experience, with all three men agreeing that proper preparation and training had been essential factors in their successful defense against the charging bear. They also acknowledged that luck had played a role, as the bear's charge had been relatively straightforward, rather than the zigzag pattern that could have made accurate shooting much more difficult. Media interest in their story developed after official reports were filed, with local newspapers and outdoor magazines requesting interviews about their encounter and defensive shooting. The men agreed to limited media contact as a way of educating other outdoorsmen about bear safety and preparation, though they avoided sensationalized accounts that might misrepresent the realities of wilderness travel in Alaska. Tom's photographs from the trip, including several images taken before and after their bear encounter, provided valuable documentation of both the scenic beauty and inherent dangers of Kodiak Island wilderness areas. His images were later used in several outdoor magazine articles about bear safety and proper preparation for Alaska fishing adventures, helping to educate future travelers about realistic safety protocols. Jacob's perspective on the encounter was influenced by his recent life changes and the realization that his survival had provided an opportunity to rebuild his relationship with his teenage children. The intensity of facing potential death had clarified his priorities and motivated him to focus more attention on family responsibilities and personal relationships that had been neglected during his marital difficulties. Sam found that his leadership during the crisis had reinforced his confidence in high-pressure situations, both in wilderness settings and in his professional responsibilities as a construction supervisor. The experience of coordinating defensive action against a dangerous predator provided psychological benefits that extended beyond outdoor recreation into other areas of his life, where leadership and decision-making were required. The legal aspects of their defensive bear shooting were resolved within 6 weeks, with Alaska authorities officially determining that the shooting was justified under state self-defense statutes. No charges were filed against any of the three men, and they were commended for their proper reporting and cooperation with the investigation. The case was closed with no restrictions on their future hunting or fishing activities in Alaska. Dr. Chen's biological examination of the bear revealed several interesting findings, including evidence of previous bullet wounds that had healed, indicating the animal had survived at least one previous encounter with armed humans. Dental examination confirmed the bear's estimated age at approximately 20 years, making it one of the older bears documented in the Kodiak Island population. Stomach contents included salmon remains and blueberries, indicating normal feeding patterns leading up to the fatal encounter. Toxicology tests revealed no evidence of disease or chemical contamination that might have affected the bear's behavior, confirming that its aggressive approach was likely due to learned behavior and food conditioning rather than illness or injury. This finding supported the officials' conclusion that the defensive shooting was necessary and justified given the animal's persistent aggressive behavior despite warnings and deterrent attempts. The incident report became part of Alaska's database of human-bear encounters, providing valuable information for wildlife managers developing education and safety protocols for future outdoor recreation activities. The detailed documentation of the encounter, including photographs and witness statements, would serve as a reference case for training programs and safety education initiatives throughout Alaska. Psychological counseling was recommended for all three men to help process the traumatic aspects of their near-death experience, though each handled the emotional impacts differently based on their individual personalities and previous exposure to life-threatening situations. Tom found that discussing the encounter with a counselor helped him integrate the experience without developing ongoing anxiety about outdoor activities, while Sam and Jacob relied more on family support and continued outdoor recreation to maintain their psychological equilibrium. The damaged equipment from their encounter was eventually replaced through insurance claims, though they retained some pieces as reminders of their survival experience. Jacob kept fragments of his destroyed cooler as conversation pieces, while Tom had the dented aluminum table repaired and continued using it on subsequent fishing trips as a reminder of their successful defense against the charging bear. Planning for their 2025 Alaska fishing adventure began within months of returning home, though their destination selection process now included more detailed evaluation of bear activity levels and population densities in potential fishing areas. Their experience had not deterred them from future Alaska travel, but had refined their understanding of proper preparation and risk management for wilderness activities in areas with high brown bear populations. The story of their encounter spread through the Pacific Northwest outdoor recreation community, leading to speaking engagements at sportsmen's clubs and outdoor gear retailers, where they shared their experience and emphasized the importance of proper preparation for Alaska wilderness travel. Their presentations typically included detailed discussion of equipment selection, tactical planning, and psychological preparation for potential life-threatening encounters with large predators. Maria Rivera's reaction to her husband's near-death experience was complex, combining relief at his survival with increased concern about future Alaska adventures. Her medical background made her acutely aware of how differently the encounter might have ended with slightly different circumstances or less effective defensive action. She ultimately supported continued Alaska travel, but insisted on enhanced safety protocols and communication procedures for future trips. The friendship between the three men was strengthened by their shared survival experience, creating bonds that extended well beyond their mutual interest in fishing and outdoor recreation. The knowledge that they had successfully defended each other's lives under extreme pressure provided a foundation of trust and mutual respect that influenced other areas of their relationships, from business dealings to family interactions. Equipment modifications for future trips included upgrading their rifle selection to .375H and H Magnum caliber for increased stopping power on large bears, though they retained confidence in their .300 Winchester Magnum rifles based on their proven performance during the encounter. They also invested in improved bear deterrent systems, including more powerful electric fence units and additional bear spray canisters for backup protection. Communication upgrades included satellite communicators for each individual rather than relying on a single unit for group communication, ensuring redundancy in emergency communication capabilities. They also upgraded their VHF marine radio system to include handheld units for each person, allowing better coordination during fishing activities and emergency situations. Training improvements included additional range practice with moving targets and stress shooting exercises designed to simulate the psychological pressure of defensive shooting against charging animals. They also completed wilderness first aid courses to improve their ability to handle medical emergencies in remote locations where professional medical help might be hours or days away. The bear hide was prepared by a professional taxidermist and eventually displayed in Sam's home office as a reminder of their survival experience, though the decision to preserve the hide generated some controversy among family members who felt it was inappropriate to commemorate the death of such a magnificent animal. Sam ultimately kept the hide as an educational tool for discussions about Alaska wildlife and wilderness safety rather than as a trophy display. Research into brown bear behavior patterns became an ongoing interest for all three men, leading to extensive reading about bear biology, management practices, and encounter prevention strategies. Their library of bear-related books and research papers grew substantially as they sought to understand the factors that had contributed to their dangerous encounter and how similar situations might be avoided in the future. The Kodiak Island brown bear population continued to thrive despite occasional removals of problem animals like the one they had encountered, with wildlife biologists estimating approximately 3,500 bears throughout the island complex. Their encounter represented a tiny fraction of annual human-bear interactions in the region, most of which were resolved without violence through proper safety protocols and mutual avoidance strategies. Local fishing guides on Kodiak Island incorporated details of their encounter into safety briefings for clients, using their experience as an example of proper preparation and response to dangerous wildlife encounters. The story became part of the informal education system that helped prepare visiting sportsmen for the realities of fishing in Alaska's premier brown bear habitat. Tom's photographs from their trip were eventually published in Alaska Magazine and several outdoor recreation publications, helping to illustrate articles about bear safety and wilderness preparedness. His images of the massive bear and the aftermath of their encounter provided powerful visual evidence of the serious nature of brown bear encounters in Alaska wilderness areas. The economic impact of their trip included positive contributions to the local Kodiak economy through equipment rentals, accommodations, and services, demonstrating that wildlife-related tourism could provide sustainable economic benefits even when dangerous encounters occasionally occurred. Their experience reinforced the importance of proper preparation and professional guidance for visiting sportsmen unfamiliar with Alaska conditions. Weather patterns during their 2024 trip were typical for late October on Kodiak Island, with the approaching storm system that had influenced their final day's activities representing normal seasonal weather transitions. The timing of their bear encounter in relation to changing weather conditions highlighted the importance of maintaining vigilance even when environmental factors created additional stress and distraction. Follow-up communication with Alaska authorities confirmed that no additional bear incidents occurred in their fishing area during the remainder of the 2024 season, suggesting that their defensive shooting had removed a problem animal that might otherwise have posed continuing risks to other outdoor recreation users. The removal of food-conditioned bears was considered an important wildlife management tool for maintaining public safety in popular recreation areas. The psychological impacts of their experience continued to evolve over time, with each man processing different aspects of their survival experience according to their individual personalities and life circumstances. The shared trauma had created lasting bonds between them, while also providing personal growth opportunities related to crisis management, decision-making under pressure, and appreciation for the fragility of human life in wilderness settings. Their story joined the extensive collection of Alaska bear encounter accounts that served to educate future generations of outdoor enthusiasts about the realities of wilderness travel in one of North America's most challenging environments. The detailed documentation of their experience, from pre-trip planning through post-incident investigation, provided a comprehensive case study that would benefit others planning similar adventures in Alaska's remote regions. The successful resolution of their life-threatening encounter demonstrated that proper preparation, quality equipment, coordinated teamwork, and accurate shooting could overcome even the most dangerous wildlife encounters when retreat was not possible. Their experience reinforced the importance of taking brown bear safety seriously while proving that well-prepared outdoor enthusiasts could successfully defend themselves when necessary. The memory of their October 27, 2024 encounter with the massive Kodiak brown bear would remain with Samuel Rivera, Jacob Rivera, and Thomas Gray for the rest of their lives, serving as both a reminder of their mortality and proof of their ability to survive and overcome extreme danger through preparation, courage, and mutual support. Their story became part of the rich tradition of Alaska survival accounts that inspired and educated future generations of wilderness adventurers seeking their own challenges in the last frontier. The final tally of their fishing success was almost forgotten in the aftermath of their bear encounter, though they had achieved their goal of harvesting excellent salmon for their families while experiencing the magnificent wilderness that made Alaska legendary among outdoor enthusiasts. The fish they brought home provided dozens of meals and countless opportunities to retell the story of their survival against one of North America's most formidable predators. Years later, their children and grandchildren would hear detailed accounts of that October morning when 3 middle-aged fishermen from Oregon successfully defended their lives against a charging brown bear on a remote beach in Uyak Bay. The story would become family legend, inspiring future generations to seek their own adventures while respecting the power and unpredictability of Alaska's magnificent wilderness and its iconic wildlife. The legacy of their encounter extended beyond personal experience to contribute to the broader understanding of human-wildlife interactions in Alaska, providing valuable data for wildlife managers, safety educators, and future wilderness travelers. Their willingness to share their story honestly and completely helped advance the collective knowledge that would protect others facing similar challenges in Alaska's vast and unforgiving wilderness areas. In the end, their successful defense against the charging Kodiak brown bear represented both personal triumph and sobering reminder of the risks inherent in wilderness travel, validating their decision to prepare thoroughly while highlighting the importance of maintaining respect for Alaska's magnificent but dangerous wildlife. Their story would live on as testament to human adaptability, courage, and the enduring appeal of wilderness adventure despite its inherent dangers and uncertainties. The next stories. Kodiak Bear Mauls. Bus of tourists. 8 injured. August 2nd, 2025. The morning of August 2nd, 2025 dawned with the kind of crystalline clarity that draws tourists to Alaska's wilderness by the thousands. At 5:47 a.m., the first rays of sunlight pierced through the towering Sitka spruces surrounding Fraser Lake, casting long shadows across the mirror-like water that reflected the jagged peaks of the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. The temperature hovered at a comfortable 62 degrees Fahrenheit, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wild roses and the distant salt tang of the Pacific Ocean. Weather station KOD-7, located 12 miles northeast of the lake, recorded optimal visibility extending beyond 25 miles, with scattered cirrus clouds at 8,000 feet providing a backdrop of ethereal beauty against the azure sky. Matthew Thomas Carter adjusted his well-worn baseball cap bearing the logo of Kodiak Wilderness Adventures as he performed his morning equipment check beside the gleaming white Ford F-750 tour bus parked at the Fraser Lake staging area. At 39 years old, Carter possessed the weathered features and steady demeanor that comes from spending 15 years guiding tourists through some of Alaska's most pristine and potentially dangerous wilderness areas. His calloused hands moved with practiced efficiency as he checked tire pressure, fluid levels, and the integrity of the emergency equipment secured in the bus's rear compartment. Born and raised in Kodiak, Carter understood the delicate balance between showcasing the raw beauty of his homeland and maintaining the safety of visitors who often underestimated the very real dangers that lurked beneath Alaska's postcard-perfect exterior. Carter's wife, Sarah Michelle Carter, had kissed him goodbye at 4:15 a.m. that morning from their modest ranch-style home on Mill Bay Road, their 2 children, Emma, age 12, and Jacob, age 9, still sleeping peacefully in their beds. Sarah worked as a registered nurse at Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center and had grown accustomed to her husband's early departures during the peak tourist season. She had reminded him to call when he reached Fraser Lake, a ritual they maintained despite 15 years of marriage and countless successful tours. Carter's phone showed 3 bars of cellular coverage at the staging area, and he dutifully sent Sarah a text message at 5:52 a.m. Arrived safely. Beautiful morning. Love you. The tour group for that fateful Friday consisted of 14 passengers, each carrying their own dreams, expectations, and varying levels of wilderness experience. Dr. Helena Rose Abrahamson, a 53-year-old cardiologist from Seattle, had booked the excursion as part of a long-awaited vacation, celebrating her recent promotion to Chief of Cardiology at Virginia Mason Medical Center. Divorced for 7 years and the mother of 2 college-age daughters, Dr. Abrahamson had developed a passion for wildlife photography that served as both hobby and therapeutic escape from the demanding pressures of her medical career. Her Nikon D850 camera, equipped with a 200 to 500 millimeter telephoto lens, hung from a professional-grade strap around her neck, and she had already captured dozens of images during the 2-hour journey from Kodiak Airport to the lake. Sitting in the 3rd row of the bus, retired petroleum engineer James Robert Morrison, 67, dozed fitfully against the window. Morrison had spent 43 years working oil fields from Prudhoe Bay to the Gulf of Mexico before retiring to a comfortable pension and a waterfront home in Homer, Alaska. His wife of 44 years, Dorothy Jane Morrison, 65, occupied the seat beside him, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she worked on a sweater for their newest grandchild. The Morrisons had booked the tour to celebrate their upcoming 45th wedding anniversary, choosing Kodiak specifically because Dorothy had always harbored a fascination with brown bears that bordered on obsession. Their Anchorage hotel room had been filled with field guides, bear behavior documentaries, and wildlife photography equipment that Dorothy insisted they needed for the expedition. In the front seats, directly behind Carter's driver position, sat 28-year-old software engineer David Chen and his girlfriend of 3 years, marketing specialist Jennifer Lynn Walsh, 26. Both residents of San Francisco, they had saved for 18 months to afford this Alaskan adventure, viewing it as a test of their relationship's durability before taking the next step toward engagement. David's Canon EOS R5 camera captured video footage of their journey, while Jennifer maintained a detailed travel blog that she updated via the bus's Wi-Fi connection whenever cellular coverage permitted. Their relationship had weathered the stresses of competitive careers and urban living, but neither had experienced anything approaching true wilderness, and both harbored secret anxieties about their ability to handle whatever challenges the day might bring. Dr. Patricia Ann Wolfe, a 41-year-old marine biologist from the University of Washington, sat alone in the 5th row, reviewing field notes from her ongoing research into the feeding patterns of Kodiak brown bears. Her presence on the tour served a dual purpose, gathering observational data for her research while enjoying a rare break from academic responsibilities. Dr. Wolfe's expertise in ursine behavior would prove both invaluable and tragically insufficient in the hours ahead. Her laptop contained over 300 pages of research data, including detailed behavioral profiles of 17 individual bears that had been tracked and studied in the Fraser Lake region over the past 5 years. The Martinez family occupied the 6th and 7th rows. Carlos Martinez, 34, an automotive mechanic from Phoenix. His wife, Rosa Martinez, 31, an elementary school teacher, and their 3 children, Sophia, age 10, Miguel, age 8, and baby Isabella, 14 months old. The family had won the trip through a radio station contest, their first vacation outside Arizona, and an opportunity that seemed almost too good to be true. Carlos spoke limited English, while Rosa served as the family's primary communicator with the tour group. The children buzzed with excitement, pressing their faces against the windows and pointing at every bird, plant, or geological feature that caught their attention. Rounding out the passenger manifest were retired Coast Guard Captain William Thomas Hendricks, 72, and his second wife, former flight attendant Margaret Sue Hendricks, 58. Captain Hendricks had served 35 years in the Coast Guard, including multiple tours in Alaskan waters, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the region's maritime history. His wife Margaret had booked the tour as a surprise for his 72nd birthday, despite his protestations that he had already seen enough of Alaska to last several lifetimes. Margaret's enthusiasm for wildlife viewing proved infectious, and she had appointed herself as the group's unofficial social coordinator, ensuring that everyone felt included and comfortable throughout the journey. At 6:15 a.m., Carter gathered the group beside the bus for his standard pre-excursion safety briefing. The staging area consisted of a gravel parking lot capable of accommodating 6 large vehicles, surrounded by a split-rail fence that served more as a symbolic boundary than an actual barrier. A weathered wooden sign provided information about the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge, including regulations, emergency contact information, and warnings about wildlife encounters. Carter's briefing covered standard wilderness safety protocols, maintaining appropriate distances from wildlife, staying with the group at all times, following guide instructions without question, and understanding the location and proper use of emergency equipment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp morning air, "we are entering one of the world's most pristine wilderness areas, home to the largest concentration of brown bears in North America. These magnificent animals deserve our respect and caution. Brown bears, including the Kodiak subspecies we may encounter today, can weigh up to 1,500 pounds and run at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour. While attacks on humans are extremely rare, they do occur, and our safety depends on following established protocols." Carter gestured toward the surrounding forest, where countless game trails disappeared into the dense understory of Devil's Club, salmonberry bushes, and towering spruces. The bears in this region are generally well-fed and not aggressive toward humans, but we must remember that this is their home, not ours. We are visitors here, and we must act accordingly. If we encounter a bear, do not run, do not make sudden movements, and do not attempt to approach for photographs or any other reason. Back away slowly while facing the animal, make yourself appear large by raising your arms or jacket above your head, and speak in calm, firm tones. Dr. Abrahamson raised her hand. "What about bear spray? Should we be carrying it?" "I have bear spray and other deterrents," Carter replied, patting a canister attached to his belt. "But our best defense is prevention through proper behavior and awareness of our surroundings. The bus itself provides excellent protection, and we'll be staying close to the vehicle at all times during our stops." The briefing continued for 23 minutes, covering topics ranging from proper photography etiquette to emergency evacuation procedures. Carter distributed laminated cards containing his cellular phone number, the contact information for Kodiak search and rescue, and GPS coordinates for their planned stops throughout the day. Each passenger signed a comprehensive liability waiver that had been crafted by Kodiak Wilderness Adventures legal team following several minor incidents over the previous season. At 6:43 a.m., the group boarded the bus for the 12-mile journey to their first planned stop at Fraser Lake's northern shore. The gravel access road wound through dense forest punctuated by small clearings where previous logging operations had created meadows now reclaimed by nature. Carter maintained a steady speed of 25 miles per hour, balancing passenger comfort with the need to avoid damaging the bus's suspension on the rough terrain. The road followed the original path blazed by Russian fur traders in the 1790s, later improved by American settlers, and finally upgraded to its current condition by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in 1987. As the bus navigated a series of sharp curves 3 miles from the lake, Dorothy Morrison spotted the first wildlife of the day, a red fox trotting across a meadow with something small and furry clenched in its jaws. The sighting generated excited chatter among the passengers and a flurry of camera activity. Carter slowed the bus to allow for photographs, explaining that red foxes in the Kodiak region subsist primarily on voles, ground squirrels, and seasonal berries, though they occasionally supplement their diet with bird eggs and carrion. The fox population here has been remarkably stable for the past decade, Carter noted, his voice carrying clearly through the bus's intercom system. They've adapted well to coexisting with the brown bear population, largely by avoiding direct competition for food sources and maintaining den sites in areas bears rarely frequent. Dr. Wolf leaned forward from her seat. Have you observed any changes in fox behavior that might correlate with bear activity patterns? Carter considered the question while navigating a particularly challenging section of Washboard Road. That's an interesting observation, Dr. Wolf. I have noticed that fox sightings tend to decrease in areas where we've had recent bear activity, particularly around salmon spawning areas. Whether that's cause and effect or simply seasonal behavior patterns, I'm not qualified to say. The conversation evolved into an impromptu discussion of predator-prey relationships in Alaskan ecosystems, with Dr. Wolf providing scientific context, while Carter contributed observations from 15 years of field experience. The educational component of the tour proved popular with the passengers, and several people took notes in journals or recorded audio on their smartphones. At 7:18 a.m., the bus crested the final hill before Fraser Lake, and the passengers fell silent at the breathtaking vista that opened before them. The lake stretched for nearly 2 miles in each direction, its surface disturbed only by the gentle wake of a family of common loons fishing near the eastern shore. The surrounding mountains rose to heights exceeding 4,000 feet, their peaks still capped with snow despite the advancing summer season. Ancient glacial cirques carved dramatic bowls into the mountainsides, and waterfalls tumbled down granite faces worn smooth by millennia of ice and weather. Carter guided the bus down a steep switchback road to the lake's edge, where a small parking area provided access to a network of walking trails maintained by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. A vault toilet facility constructed of pressure-treated lumber and designed to blend with the natural environment sat discreetly among a grove of mountain hemlocks 50 yards from the parking area. Interpretive signs provided information about local geology, flora and fauna, including detailed warnings about proper food storage and wildlife safety protocols. The morning air at lake level carried a different quality than at elevation. Heavy with moisture and rich with the organic scents of decomposing vegetation, fish, and the indefinable essence of pristine wilderness. Water temperature readings from the lake's automated monitoring station showed 58 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal for the final stages of salmon spawning season. Several dead salmon, their decomposing bodies providing crucial nutrients to the ecosystem, lay scattered along the shoreline, where bears and other scavengers had dragged them from the water. Carter parked the bus in the designated area with its front facing the access road, a standard safety precaution that would allow for rapid departure if circumstances required. He activated the parking brake, turned off the engine, and rotated in his seat to address the passengers. "We'll be here for approximately 90 minutes, which gives everyone plenty of time to explore the immediate area, take photographs, and enjoy the scenery. Please remember to stay within sight of the bus at all times and notify me before wandering off, even for a short distance." The bus door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the passengers began filing out into the crisp morning air. Dr. Abrahamson immediately began photographing the lake and surrounding mountains, her camera's motor drive capturing dozens of images in rapid succession. The Martinez children raced toward the water's edge, their excited Spanish chatter echoing across the lake before Rosa called them back to stay closer to the group. Carter unloaded a folding table and camp chairs from the bus's storage compartment, creating a comfortable staging area where passengers could rest, organize their gear, and consult maps or field guides. He also retrieved a propane camp stove and began preparing coffee and hot chocolate, a service that had earned Kodiak Wilderness Adventures numerous positive reviews on travel websites. The aroma of brewing coffee mixed with the clean scent of mountain air created an atmosphere of comfortable wilderness luxury that balanced adventure with amenity. At 7:45 a.m., Dr. Wolf approached Carter with a question about recent bear activity in the immediate area. Carter consulted a waterproof notebook containing detailed records of wildlife sightings, weather conditions, and passenger observations from previous tours. "We had a sow with 2 cubs fishing along the eastern shore 3 days ago," he reported, pointing across the lake toward a section of shoreline dotted with fallen logs and dense vegetation. "They were working the salmon run pretty actively, and I'd expect them to return once the fish start running heavier." Dr. Wolf nodded, making notes in her own field journal. "Any sign of adult males in the area?" "There's been a large boar working the upper reaches of the inlet stream," Carter replied, gesturing toward the lake's northern end, where a substantial creek carried fresh water down from the mountains. "I haven't seen him personally, but other guides have reported tracks and scat along the stream corridor. Fish and Game estimates his weight at around 12 to 1,300 pounds, based on paw print measurements." The conversation was interrupted by excited shouts from David Chen, who had discovered a set of fresh bear tracks in the soft mud along the lake's edge. The tracks showed clearly in the fine sediment, massive paw prints measuring nearly 12 inches in length, with distinct claw marks extending 4 inches beyond the pad impressions. Carter examined the tracks carefully, noting their depth, spacing, and direction of travel. "These are fresh," Carter announced to the gathering group. "Probably made sometime after midnight, based on how clearly defined they are and the lack of wind or water disturbance." He pointed out specific details: the size and placement of the claws, the distinctive pigeon-toed gait pattern characteristic of brown bears, and the direction of travel indicating the animal had moved from the water's edge toward the forest. The discovery generated considerable excitement among the passengers, with cameras clicking and video recording as Carter provided an impromptu lesson in tracking techniques. He explained how to estimate an animal's size and weight based on track dimensions, how weather conditions affect track preservation, and how to determine the relative age of animal sign in wilderness conditions. Captain Hendricks, drawing on his decades of experience in Alaskan waters, shared observations about seasonal bear behavior patterns and their correlation with salmon runs, weather patterns, and human activity. "In my experience," the retired Coast Guardsman noted, "bears in this region are generally predictable in their movements, following established travel corridors and feeding areas that have been used for generations. The key to avoiding dangerous encounters is understanding those patterns and staying out of their way during critical feeding periods." At 8:32 a.m., while the passengers explored the immediate area under Carter's watchful supervision, a radio call crackled through the bus's communication system. Alaska State Trooper Sergeant Michael Patrick O'Brien, stationed in Kodiak, was conducting routine check-ins with tour operators throughout the region as part of enhanced safety protocols implemented following a series of minor wildlife encounters earlier in the season. Carter responded to the radio call, providing his location, passenger count, and current status. Sergeant O'Brien, a 14-year veteran of the Alaska State Troopers and a former military police officer, maintained detailed records of all commercial tour operations in his jurisdiction. His morning briefing had included weather reports, wildlife activity summaries, and updates on search and rescue operations throughout the region. "All quiet here, Sergeant," Carter reported. 14 passengers, everyone accounted for. "We found some fresh bear sign along the shoreline, but no visual contact with wildlife yet. Planning to move to the southern observation point in about 40 minutes. "Roger that, Matt," O'Brien replied. "We've had reports of increased bear activity throughout the region this week, probably related to the salmon run reaching peak intensity. Keep your people close and maintain situational awareness. Weather forecast shows potential thunderstorms moving in from the west this afternoon, so plan accordingly." Carter acknowledged the transmission and made a note in his logbook. The weather report concerned him slightly, as afternoon thunderstorms could create hazardous driving conditions on the gravel access roads and increase the likelihood of wildlife encounters as animals sought shelter. He made a mental note to monitor cloud development and potentially adjust the tour schedule if conditions deteriorated. The morning continued peacefully, with passengers exploring the shoreline, photographing wildflowers, and enjoying the serene beauty of the lake environment. Dr. Abrahamson captured a series of stunning images featuring the interplay of morning light on the water's surface, while the Martinez children collected smooth stones and pieces of driftwood under their parents' watchful eyes. Margaret Hendricks sketched lake and mountain views in a leather-bound journal, her artistic talents evident in the detailed renderings of the surrounding landscape. At 9:15 a.m., Carter began organizing the group for departure to their next planned stop, a scenic overlook located 2 miles south of the lake that provided panoramic views of the surrounding mountains and opportunities for wildlife viewing. The overlook, known locally as Raven's Perch, sat at an elevation of nearly 800 feet above the lake and could be reached via a well-maintained gravel road that switchbacked up the mountainside through dense forest. As the passengers gathered their gear and prepared to reboard the bus, Dr. Wolf pointed out a bald eagle soaring high above the lake, its distinctive white head and tail feathers clearly visible against the deep blue sky. The eagle executed a series of graceful turns before diving toward the water's surface, emerging with a salmon clutched in its powerful talons. The successful fishing demonstration provided an excellent photographic opportunity and generated enthusiastic commentary from the group. The bus engine started smoothly, and Carter performed his standard pre-departure safety check: passenger count, seatbelt secured, luggage properly stowed, and emergency equipment accessible. The departure from Fraser Lake proceeded without incident, with several passengers commenting on the pristine beauty of the location and expressing hope that they might return someday for a more extended visit. The road to Raven's Perch proved more challenging than the lakeside route, requiring careful navigation of steep grades, sharp curves, and several sections where recent rainfall had created washouts and soft shoulders. Carter's experience showed in his smooth handling of the challenging terrain, maintaining passenger comfort while ensuring vehicle safety. The bus's powerful diesel engine provided adequate power for the steep climbs, though Carter downshifted frequently to maintain safe speeds and reduce stress on the transmission. At 9:47 a.m., approximately halfway to the overlook, Carter rounded a sharp curve and was forced to brake suddenly as a massive brown bear emerged from the forest directly ahead of the bus. The bear, clearly an adult male based on its size and robust build, stood motionless in the center of the road, apparently unbothered by the presence of the large vehicle. Carter estimated the animal's weight at well over 1,000 pounds, with a shoulder height approaching 4 feet and a body length exceeding 8 feet from nose to tail. The sudden stop generated excited murmurs from the passengers, with cameras and smartphones immediately focused on the magnificent animal. The bear's thick chocolate-brown coat showed the characteristic shoulder hump of the brown bear species, and its massive head turned slowly to regard the bus with an expression that seemed more curious than threatening. Carter reached for his radio to report the encounter while keeping one hand on the steering wheel and his eyes fixed on the bear's behavior. "This is incredible," whispered Dr. Abrahamson, her camera capturing dozens of images through the bus's large front windshield. "Look at the size of that animal." Carter spoke quietly into his radio microphone, reporting the encounter to both Alaska State Trooper Dispatch and the local Fish and Game Office. Standard protocol required immediate notification of all bear encounters involving commercial tour groups, both for safety monitoring and wildlife research purposes. The bear's location, estimated size, behavior, and the circumstances of the encounter would be recorded in official databases used to track animal movements and assess potential human-wildlife conflicts. For nearly 4 minutes, the standoff continued, with the bear showing no inclination to move from the roadway. Carter kept the bus engine running, but avoided any sudden movements or loud noises that might startle the animal into aggressive behavior. The bear occasionally swung its massive head from side to side, testing the air currents for scents and sounds that might indicate danger or opportunity. Captain Hendricks, drawing on his extensive Alaska experience, quietly provided commentary on the bear's body language and behavior patterns. "He's not showing any signs of agitation or territorial aggression," the retired Coast Guard officer observed. "Ears are forward and alert, but not flattened. No huffing or jaw popping. He's just trying to figure out what we are and whether we represent a threat." Dr. Wolf concurred with the assessment, noting specific behavioral indicators that suggested the bear was curious rather than aggressive. She explained to the group how bears use body language to communicate their intentions and how understanding these signals could help predict an animal's likely actions. The educational component helped calm several nervous passengers while providing valuable learning opportunities. At 9:51 a.m., the bear finally moved, stepping deliberately to the roadside and disappearing into the dense forest with surprising speed and grace for such a massive animal. Carter waited an additional minute before slowly advancing, scanning the forest on both sides of the road for any sign of the bear's continued presence. The encounter had lasted 7 minutes total, providing the passengers with an unforgettable wildlife viewing experience while demonstrating the effectiveness of proper safety protocols. The remainder of the journey to Raven's Perch proceeded without incident, though Carter maintained heightened vigilance given the recent bear encounter. The road continued climbing through increasingly dense forest, with occasional clearings providing glimpses of the lake below and the surrounding mountains stretching to the horizon. Wildlife activity seemed elevated, with numerous bird species visible in the canopy and frequent signs of animal passage along the roadway. Raven's Perch proved worthy of its reputation as one of Kodiak's premier scenic viewpoints. The overlook consisted of a natural rocky outcropping that provided unobstructed views across miles of pristine wilderness. A small parking area accommodated the bus, and a network of short walking trails allowed visitors to explore various vantage points while remaining within safe distances of the vehicle. Interpretive signs provided information about the geological processes that had shaped the landscape, the cultural history of indigenous peoples in the region, and the ecological significance of the diverse habitats visible from the overlook. The passengers spent nearly an hour at Raven's Perch, photographing the spectacular scenery, identifying distant landmarks with the help of topographic maps, and simply absorbing the profound sense of wilderness solitude that such places provide. Dr. Abrahamson captured several images that she later described as among the finest of her photography career. while the Martinez children delighted in spotting birds and aircraft through borrowed binoculars. At 11:15 a.m., Carter began organizing the group for departure to their final planned stop of the morning, a salmon viewing area located at the mouth of Thompson Creek, where the stream entered Fraser Lake's southwestern corner. The location was known for excellent opportunities to observe brown bears fishing during peak salmon runs, though Carter cautioned that wildlife sightings could never be guaranteed and depended largely on timing, weather conditions, and the animals' unpredictable behavior patterns. The return journey to lake level took approximately 20 minutes, with Carter taking advantage of the downhill grades to provide additional information about local ecology, geology, and wildlife management practices. He explained how Alaska's wildlife refuge system balanced conservation goals with recreational opportunities, and how tour operators like himself contributed to both economic development and environmental education efforts. Thompson Creek proved to be another spectacular location, with crystal-clear water cascading down a series of natural stone steps before flowing into the lake through a delta of gravel bars and deep pools. The creek's banks showed extensive evidence of bear activity, well-worn trails, fishing spots where bears had stood to catch salmon, and numerous scat deposits rich with fish remains and berry seeds. Several salmon carcasses lay scattered along the shoreline, their decomposing bodies providing nutrients that would support the entire ecosystem throughout the coming winter months. Carter parked the bus in a designated area approximately 50 yards from the creek mouth, close enough for excellent viewing opportunities while maintaining safe distances from any bears that might appear. He set up the folding chairs and camp table, creating a comfortable observation post where passengers could watch for wildlife while enjoying lunch and refreshments. The menu consisted of gourmet sandwiches, fresh fruit, locally made cookies, and hot beverages, all prepared by a Kodiak catering company that specialized in wilderness tour support. At 11:52 a.m., while the passengers enjoyed their lunch and scanned the creek for signs of wildlife, Dorothy Morrison spotted movement in the forest across the stream. Through binoculars, she observed a medium-sized brown bear working its way through dense salmonberry bushes, approximately 200 yards from the group's location. The bear appeared to be following one of the established travel corridors that connected the creek to deeper forest areas, and its behavior suggested familiarity with the territory and comfort in the presence of human scent and activity. Carter confirmed the sighting and provided information about the individual animal, which he recognized as a bear he had observed on previous tours throughout the season. Fish and Game biologists had designated the bear as Bear 247 in their research database, and tracking data suggested it was a 7-year-old female weighing approximately 400 pounds. Bear 247 had been fitted with a radio collar during a research project 3 years earlier, though the collar was no longer functioning and would eventually fall off naturally as the animal's neck size changed. The bear sighting generated considerable excitement among the passengers, with cameras and video equipment capturing footage of the animal as it moved through its natural habitat. Dr. Wolf provided educational commentary on bear behavior and ecology, while Carter maintained situational awareness and monitored the animal's movements for any signs of approach toward the group's location. For the next 45 minutes, Bear 247 remained visible as she worked the creek corridor, occasionally approaching the water's edge to investigate potential fishing opportunities. The bear showed no interest in the tour group, focusing entirely on her natural foraging behaviors and demonstrating the normal wariness that keeps wild animals safe from human contact. Her presence provided an excellent opportunity for wildlife observation and photography, while reinforcing the importance of maintaining appropriate distances and respecting animal space. At 12:43 p.m., Carter received a radio call from his dispatcher at Kodiak Wilderness Adventures, requesting an update on the tour's progress and estimated time of return to Kodiak. Carter reported their current location, the successful wildlife sightings, and his intention to begin the return journey by 1:30 p.m. to ensure arrival back in Kodiak before the predicted afternoon thunderstorms developed. The dispatcher confirmed the weather forecast and advised all tour operators to expedite return trips to avoid potentially hazardous driving conditions on gravel roads during heavy rainfall. Carter consulted with the group about their preferences for the remainder of the tour, offering options that included additional time at the current location, a brief stop at another scenic viewpoint, or an early return to Kodiak with possible stops along the route if interesting wildlife or photographic opportunities presented themselves. The group voted unanimously to remain at Thompson Creek for additional wildlife viewing time, with several passengers expressing hope that Bear 247 might provide additional fishing demonstrations. The decision proved fortuitous, as Bear 247's behavior began changing in subtle ways that suggested increased activity and interest in fishing opportunities. Dr. Wolf noted changes in the bear's posture, movement patterns, and attention focus that indicated heightened awareness of salmon presence in the creek. Carter positioned the group for optimal viewing angles while maintaining safety protocols and ensuring quick access to the bus if circumstances required immediate departure. At 1:08 p.m., Bear 247 approached the creek's edge and began what Dr. Wolf described as testing behavior, wading into shallow water while monitoring the surrounding environment for potential threats or competitors. The bear's fishing technique demonstrated the intelligence and adaptability that make brown bears such successful predators. Patient observation, precise timing, and explosive speed when striking at passing salmon. Over the course of 12 minutes, Bear 247 successfully caught 3 salmon, consuming 2 immediately and caching the third beneath a fallen log for later consumption. The fishing demonstration provided unparalleled wildlife viewing opportunities and generated hundreds of photographs and several minutes of high-quality video footage. Carter noted that such extended fishing behavior was relatively rare during guided tours, as bears typically avoided areas with human activity during daylight hours. The successful fishing session represented a combination of optimal timing, favorable conditions, and the individual bear's comfort level with distant human presence. As Bear 247 concluded her fishing activities and moved back into the forest, Carter began preparing the group for departure. Weather conditions remained favorable, with scattered clouds building over the western mountains, but no immediate threat of precipitation. The return journey to Kodiak would require approximately 2 hours, including brief stops for additional photography opportunities and a final scenic overlook before descending to the developed areas around Kodiak City. At 1:31 p.m., Carter completed his pre-departure safety check and started the bus engine. All passengers were accounted for, gear was properly stored, and emergency equipment remained easily accessible. The successful wildlife sightings had created a festive atmosphere among the group, with animated conversations about the day's experiences and plans for sharing photographs and videos with friends and family. The bus pulled away from Thompson Creek as Carter waved goodbye to the pristine wilderness that had provided such memorable experiences for his passengers. The return route would follow the same gravel roads they had used to reach the lake, with planned stops at 2 scenic overlooks that provided different perspectives on the landscape and opportunities for final photographs before returning to civilization. However, approximately 800 yards from Thompson Creek, disaster struck with shocking suddenness and devastating consequences. Carter had just navigated a sharp curve and was accelerating up a moderate grade when an enormous male brown bear emerged from dense forest directly beside the road. Unlike the earlier encounter, where the bear had appeared in the roadway and remained stationary, this animal demonstrated immediate aggressive intent, charging directly toward the moving bus with terrifying speed and purpose. The bear, later determined by fish and game biologists to be an adult male weighing approximately 1,300 pounds, covered the 30-yard distance between forest edge and roadway in less than 4 seconds. Carter had insufficient time to accelerate away from the charging animal and no room to maneuver on the narrow road bordered by dense forest on both sides. His only option was to brake hard and hope the bus's size and noise would deter the attacking animal. The massive bear struck the bus's right side with tremendous force, its claws raking across metal and glass as it attempted to climb onto the vehicle. The impact rocked the bus violently, throwing passengers against seats and windows while generating a cacophony of screaming metal, shattering glass, and terrified human voices. Carter fought to maintain control as the bear's weight shifted the bus's center of gravity and its claws found purchase on the exterior surfaces. The bear's initial assault targeted the passenger windows along the bus's right side, where its massive paws and extended claws created multiple points of entry. The safety glass designed to protect passengers from normal hazards proved inadequate against the determined assault of 1,300 pounds of muscle, bone, and razor-sharp claws driven by predatory instinct and territorial aggression. Within seconds, several windows had been compromised, and the bear had gained partial access to the passenger compartment. Dr. Patricia Wolfe, seated in the 5th row on the right side, found herself directly in the path of the bear's initial entry attempt. The massive animal's head and front paws forced their way through the shattered window beside her seat, close enough that she could smell the bear's breath and see the individual hairs on its muzzle. Acting on pure instinct and her knowledge of bear behavior, Dr. Wolfe rolled away from the window and toward the aisle, screaming warnings to the other passengers while fighting to escape the immediate danger zone. The bear's claws raked across Dr. Wolfe's back and left shoulder as she attempted to escape, tearing through her jacket and into the flesh beneath. The wounds, while not immediately life-threatening, bled profusely and would require extensive medical treatment. Dr. Wolfe's screams of pain and terror added to the chaos within the bus as passengers struggled to understand what was happening and respond to the unprecedented crisis. Carter immediately activated his emergency radio beacon while fighting to control the bus as the bear's weight and movements threatened to overturn the vehicle. His training and experience had prepared him for various wildlife encounters, but nothing in 15 years of guiding had approached the violence and intensity of this attack. The bus's engine continued running, but the transmission had been damaged by the impact, limiting his ability to accelerate away from the attacking animal. In the 3rd row, Dorothy Morrison suffered severe injuries as the bear's claws reached through a compromised window and struck her right arm and shoulder. The elderly woman's screams pierced the chaos as blood soaked through her clothing, and her husband James desperately tried to pull her away from the window while protecting her from further attack. Captain Hendricks, despite his 72 years, immediately moved to assist the Morrisons while shouting commands that drew on decades of military and maritime experience in crisis situations. The Martinez family, seated in the 6th and 7th rows, found themselves trapped as the bear's massive body blocked their escape route toward the front of the bus. Rosa Martinez clutched baby Isabella while attempting to shield her other children from the terrifying scene unfolding around them. Carlos Martinez, despite the language barrier, understood the immediate danger and began breaking out windows on the left side of the bus to create alternative escape routes for his family and other passengers. David Chen and Jennifer Walsh, seated near the front of the bus, initially escaped direct contact with the attacking bear, but found themselves unable to exit through the front door as Carter struggled to maintain control of the vehicle and coordinate emergency response efforts. David's camera continued recording, capturing footage that would later prove crucial for understanding the attack sequence and evaluating emergency response procedures. The bear's assault continued for what seemed like hours, but actually lasted approximately 6 minutes. During this time, the animal demonstrated remarkable persistence and problem-solving ability, systematically working to gain greater access to the passenger compartment while ignoring the noise, movement, and defensive efforts of the humans trapped inside. Its behavior suggested either extreme territoriality or possible previous negative experiences with human activity that had created abnormal aggression patterns. Dr. Helena Abrahamson, attempting to reach her medical kit stored in the overhead compartment, was struck by the bear's claws across her right leg and hip as the animal's reach extended deeper into the bus interior. The wounds severed several blood vessels and created deep lacerations that would require immediate surgical intervention to prevent life-threatening blood loss. Dr. Abrahamson's medical training allowed her to assess her own injuries and recognize the severity of her condition, though her ability to provide first aid was severely limited by her position and the ongoing attack. Carter's radio calls had been received by Alaska State Trooper Dispatch, and Sergeant O'Brien was already coordinating emergency response efforts from his patrol vehicle 23 miles away. However, the remote location and challenging terrain meant that help was still at least 40 minutes away, and the attacking bear showed no signs of losing interest or abandoning its assault on the bus and its occupants. The bear's claws had created numerous entry points along the right side of the bus, and its massive head and shoulders had penetrated the passenger compartment sufficiently to reach passengers in multiple rows. Blood spattered the interior surfaces as the animal's claws found their marks, and the screams of injured passengers mixed with the sounds of rending metal and the bear's own vocalizations, huffing, snorting, and occasional roars that demonstrated its aggressive state and determination to continue the attack. Margaret Hendricks suffered severe injuries to her face and scalp when the bear's claws raked across the right side of her head as she attempted to move toward the front of the bus. The injuries, while disfiguring and painful, missed her eyes and other critical structures, though the psychological trauma of the attack would prove as significant as the physical wounds. Her husband, Captain Hendricks, continued his efforts to coordinate passenger movements and emergency response, despite his own shock and concern for his wife's condition. Carter finally managed to engage the bus's damaged transmission and lurched forward approximately 50 yards before the bear leaped down from the vehicle and pursued on foot. The animal's speed and agility allowed it to keep pace with the slow-moving bus for several hundred yards, during which time it made repeated attempts to regain access to the passenger compartment through the damaged windows and compromised structural integrity of the vehicle's right side. The bear's pursuit finally ended when Carter managed to negotiate a sharp curve that broke the animal's line of sight and allowed him to gain additional distance. The bus limped toward the main road, while Carter continued radio communications with emergency responders, providing updates on passenger injuries and requesting immediate medical evacuation capabilities. His calm professionalism under extreme pressure would later earn commendation from Alaska State Trooper leadership and recognition from tour industry organizations. Inside the bus, the immediate crisis had passed, but the consequences were severe and ongoing. 8 passengers required immediate medical attention, with injuries ranging from deep lacerations and tissue trauma to potential internal injuries from the violent impacts and movements during the attack. Dr. Abrahamson, despite her own significant injuries, began providing first aid to other passengers using supplies from Carter's emergency medical kit and her own professional equipment. The Martinez children, while not physically injured, were severely traumatized by witnessing the attack and seeing injured passengers covered in blood. Rosa Martinez, herself uninjured, attempted to comfort her children while assisting with first aid efforts. The language barrier complicated communication, but the universal nature of the crisis created cooperation and understanding that transcended normal communication challenges. Dr. Wolf, despite her back and shoulder injuries, provided valuable assistance by using her knowledge of emergency medicine and wilderness first aid to help stabilize injured passengers until professional medical help could arrive. Her calm demeanor and medical expertise helped reduce panic among uninjured passengers while ensuring that those with serious injuries received appropriate immediate care. Carter reached the main paved road at 2:17 p.m. and immediately encountered the first emergency response vehicle, Alaska State Trooper Sergeant O'Brien's patrol car equipped with emergency medical supplies and advanced communication equipment. Sergeant O'Brien had driven at maximum safe speed over challenging terrain to reach the tour group and coordinate the complex emergency response required for multiple injured passengers in a remote wilderness location. Behind Sergeant O'Brien, a convoy of emergency vehicles was en route to the scene. 3 ambulances from Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center, a flight crew from Alaska State Troopers helicopter unit, personnel from Kodiak Search and Rescue, and additional state trooper units to secure the scene and conduct preliminary investigation of the attack. The response represented the largest wilderness emergency operation in Kodiak region in over 5 years. Dr. Sarah Carter received the phone call that every guide's spouse dreads at 2:19 p.m. while working her shift at Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center. The caller, a state trooper dispatcher, provided basic information. Her husband Matthew's tour bus had been attacked by a brown bear. Multiple passengers were injured, and all emergency response resources were being deployed to the scene. Dr. Carter immediately requested permission to leave her shift and join the medical team responding to the emergency. The hospital's emergency department, under the direction of Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to passenger David Chen, initiated mass casualty protocols despite the relatively small number of injured patients. 8 trauma bays were prepared, surgical staff were called in from off-duty status, and blood bank supplies were checked and prepared for potential massive transfusion needs. The hospital's helicopter landing pad was cleared and prepared for incoming flight evacuations from the attack site. At the attack location, Sergeant O'Brien conducted rapid triage of injured passengers while coordinating with incoming emergency medical personnel via radio. His assessment identified 3 passengers requiring immediate helicopter evacuation to advanced trauma facilities in Anchorage. Dr. Abrahamson with severe leg and hip injuries, Dorothy Morrison with arm and shoulder trauma complicated by her age, and Margaret Hendricks with significant head and facial injuries requiring plastic surgery consultation. The first ambulance arrived at 2:31 p.m., followed quickly by 2 additional units and a mobile command vehicle equipped with advanced communication and coordination equipment. Paramedics and emergency medical technicians began immediate treatment of injured passengers, while flight crews prepared helicopter landing zones in the limited space available alongside the Wilderness Access Road. The coordination of multiple agencies and resources proceeded smoothly, despite the challenging location and circumstances. Dr. Wolf, Carlos Martinez and Jennifer Walsh were classified as having moderate injuries requiring immediate hospital treatment, but not necessitating helicopter transport. Their injuries, while significant, were stable and could be managed during ground transport to Kodiak Island Medical Center. Patricia Martinez had sustained a minor injury to her arm during the chaos, but did not require immediate medical intervention beyond basic first aid and observation. The uninjured passengers, David Chen, James Morrison, Captain Hendricks, and the Martinez children were evacuated from the scene by ground transport and taken to the hospital for observation, psychological support, and coordination with family members. The emotional trauma of witnessing the attack and seeing friends and fellow travelers injured would require ongoing counseling and support services for weeks or months following the incident. Carter, despite suffering minor injuries and severe emotional trauma, remained at the scene to assist with the investigation and provide detailed information about the attack sequence, the bear's behavior, and the circumstances leading up to the incident. His professional demeanor and comprehensive knowledge of the incident would prove crucial for both immediate response efforts and long-term analysis of the attack. Alaska Department of Fish and Game wildlife biologist Dr. Amanda Foster arrived at the scene at 3:15 p.m. to begin preliminary investigation of the bear attack and assess the need for immediate wildlife management actions. Dr. Foster's expertise in brown bear behavior and human-wildlife conflicts made her the obvious choice to lead the biological investigation and determine appropriate response measures to prevent future incidents. The investigation would eventually determine that the attacking bear was a mature male, approximately 15 years old, with no previous history of aggressive behavior toward humans. Tissue samples collected from the bus's damaged surfaces would provide DNA evidence allowing positive identification of the individual animal, though the bear was never recaptured or destroyed. Post-incident monitoring suggested that the attack represented abnormal behavior triggered by unknown factors rather than a pattern of human aggression that would require management intervention. The helicopter evacuation of the 3 most seriously injured passengers began at 3:42 p.m. with the departure of Dr. Abrahamson aboard Alaska State Troopers medical helicopter bound for Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage. The flight, conducted under challenging weather conditions as afternoon thunderstorms developed over the mountainous terrain, required exceptional skill from the flight crew and precise coordination with air traffic control and medical personnel at the receiving facility. Dorothy Morrison was evacuated aboard a second helicopter at 4:18 p.m., accompanied by her husband James, despite his own minor injuries and advanced age. The elderly couple's 44-year marriage had survived numerous challenges, but the trauma of the bear attack would test their resilience and require extensive support from family, friends, and professional counselors. Dorothy's physical recovery would prove lengthy and complicated, requiring multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. Margaret Hendricks was the final helicopter evacuation, departing at 4:51 p.m. with her husband Captain Hendricks serving as escort. The head and facial injuries she sustained would require immediate surgical intervention and consultation with plastic surgery specialists to minimize permanent disfigurement and restore function to damaged facial structures. The psychological impact of the facial injuries would prove as challenging as the physical trauma in her long-term recovery process. Ground ambulance transport of the moderately injured passengers began at 4:07 p.m. with Dr. Wolf, Carlos Martinez, and Jennifer Walsh receiving advanced life support care during the 43-minute journey to Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center. The ambulance crews provided continuous monitoring and treatment, while maintaining radio contact with the hospital's emergency department to ensure preparation of appropriate treatment resources upon arrival. The emergency department at Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center had been transformed into a major trauma receiving area, with additional staff called in and specialized equipment prepared for the unique injuries associated with bear attacks. Dr. Robert Chen, the emergency department director, had consulted with trauma specialists in Anchorage and Seattle to ensure optimal treatment protocols for the unusual injury patterns created by bear claws and the violent nature of the attack. Dr. Sarah Carter arrived at the hospital at 3:57 p.m. and was immediately briefed on the status of incoming patients and her husband's condition. While Matthew Carter had sustained only minor physical injuries, the emotional trauma of the attack and his sense of responsibility for his passengers' safety created psychological stress that would require ongoing professional support. Sarah's medical background and intimate knowledge of her husband's dedication to passenger safety helped her provide appropriate emotional support during the initial crisis period. The first ground ambulance arrived at the hospital at 4:52 p.m., with Dr. Wolf requiring immediate surgical consultation for her back and shoulder injuries. The bear's claws had created deep lacerations through muscle and fascia, requiring careful cleaning and repair to prevent infection and ensure proper healing. Dr. Wolf's medical background allowed her to participate in treatment planning and provide valuable information about the injury mechanism and timeline. Carlos Martinez required treatment for multiple lacerations on his arms and hands, sustained while attempting to break out windows and protect his family during the attack. The injuries, while not life-threatening, required careful cleaning and suturing due to the contaminated nature of the wounds and the risk of infection from organic material introduced by the bear's claws. Cultural and language considerations required the hospital to arrange for Spanish-speaking medical interpreters to ensure proper communication during treatment. Jennifer Walsh's injuries included lacerations to her shoulder and upper back, similar to those sustained by Dr. Wolf, though somewhat less severe due to her position in the bus during the attack. Her treatment required surgical cleaning and repair of damaged tissue, followed by careful monitoring for signs of infection or complications. The psychological trauma of the attack would prove more challenging than the physical injuries in her recovery process. David Chen, despite being physically uninjured, required medical evaluation and psychological support following the traumatic experience of witnessing the attack and seeing his girlfriend injured. The video footage he had captured during the attack would prove valuable for investigators and researchers studying bear behavior, though viewing and discussing the footage created additional emotional challenges during his recovery process. James Morrison, at 67 years old, required cardiac monitoring and medical evaluation due to the extreme stress of witnessing his wife's injuries and the overall trauma of the attack. His blood pressure and heart rate required medication management, and he was admitted to the hospital for observation and support while his wife underwent treatment at Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage. Captain Hendricks demonstrated remarkable resilience for a 72-year-old man, though the stress of seeing his wife injured and the responsibility of coordinating passenger evacuation created significant emotional strain. His military and maritime background had prepared him for crisis situations, but the personal nature of this emergency challenged his ability to maintain professional detachment and emotional stability. The Martinez children, Sofia, Miguel, and baby Isabella, required specialized pediatric psychological support to help them process the traumatic experience of witnessing the bear attack. Child psychologists from the hospital's mental health department worked with Spanish-speaking colleagues to provide culturally appropriate counseling and support services for the family. Rosa Martinez's strength and resilience in protecting her children during the attack earned admiration from medical staff and other passengers. At Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage, Dr. Abrahamson underwent emergency surgery to repair vascular damage and address deep tissue trauma in her right leg and hip. The surgical team, led by orthopedic trauma specialist Dr. Michael Thompson, worked for 4 hours to clean contaminated wounds, repair damaged muscles and tendons, and restore blood flow to affected areas. The complexity of the injuries required a multidisciplinary approach involving orthopedic, vascular, and plastic surgery specialists. Dorothy Morrison's surgery began at 7:30 p.m. with orthopedic surgeon Dr. Jennifer Martinez, no relation to the Martinez family from the tour, addressing complex fractures and soft tissue damage in her right arm and shoulder. The elderly woman's age and underlying health conditions complicated the surgical approach and recovery planning, requiring careful balance between aggressive treatment of injuries and consideration of her overall medical status and ability to tolerate extensive procedures. Margaret Hendricks underwent facial reconstruction surgery beginning at 8:15 p.m., with plastic surgeon Dr. David Kim working to repair damage to facial muscles, nerves and skin caused by the bear's claws. The surgery required microsurgical techniques to restore nerve function and minimize scarring, though complete restoration of pre-injury appearance and function would require additional procedures over several months. The media response to the bear attack began within hours of the incident, with local Kodiak radio stations providing initial reports based on emergency radio traffic and official statements from Alaska State Troopers. By evening, the story had been picked up by statewide news outlets in Anchorage and Fairbanks, and by the following morning, national news organizations were requesting interviews and additional information about the unprecedented attack. Alaska Department of Fish and Game issued a preliminary statement at 8 p.m. on August 2nd, confirming the bear attack and announcing an immediate investigation to determine the circumstances and assess the need for wildlife management actions. The statement emphasized that brown bear attacks on tour groups were extremely rare and that the incident appeared to represent abnormal behavior rather than typical bear-human interactions in the region. Kodiak Wilderness Adventures suspended all tours pending investigation of the attack and implementation of enhanced safety protocols. Company owner Robert Davidson issued a statement expressing concern for injured passengers and support for guide Matthew Carter, while announcing cooperation with all investigating agencies and commitment to preventing similar incidents in the future. The company's insurance carriers began immediate investigation and claims processing for injured passengers and property damage. The Alaska Tour Guide Association issued a statement calling for industry-wide review of wildlife encounter protocols and enhanced training requirements for guides operating in areas with high concentrations of brown bears. The organization's president, veteran guide Patricia Williams, announced formation of a safety committee to develop improved standards for wildlife viewing activities and emergency response procedures. Social media coverage of the attack began with posts from uninjured passengers and family members. Quickly spreading to outdoor recreation and wildlife enthusiast communities across North America. The dramatic nature of the incident and the availability of video footage captured by David Chen created intense public interest and extensive online discussion about bear behavior, tour safety, and wilderness recreation risks. Tourism industry leaders in Alaska expressed concern about potential impact on visitor numbers and industry reputation, while emphasizing the statistical rarity of such incidents and the overall safety record of professional tour operators. Alaska Tourism Industry Association President Mark Stevens announced plans for an emergency meeting to address industry response and develop strategies for maintaining public confidence in Alaska tourism products. The first night following the attack proved challenging for all involved parties. Injured passengers underwent surgery and initial treatment, while family members traveled to Alaska from across the United States to provide support and assistance. Hospital staff worked extended shifts to accommodate the unusual patient load and coordinate with colleagues in Anchorage, treating the most seriously injured victims. Matthew Carter remained at Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center overnight for observation and support, though his physical injuries were minor. His wife, Sarah, provided emotional support while dealing with her own trauma from nearly losing her husband and witnessing the suffering of people she had come to know through his work. The couple's children were cared for by Sarah's parents, who flew in from Anchorage to provide family support during the crisis. Dr. Patricia Wolf's first night in the hospital was complicated by pain from her injuries and ongoing stress from the traumatic experience. As a scientist who had studied bear behavior for years, she struggled to understand what had triggered the attack and whether her research might provide insights for preventing similar incidents. Her injuries prevented her from participating in the initial investigation, though she would later provide valuable input to researchers studying the incident. Investigation of the attack site continued through the night, with fish and game biologists collecting evidence and documenting the scene under portable lighting systems. The damaged tour bus was photographed extensively, and samples of bear hair and tissue were collected from the clawed surfaces for DNA analysis and individual animal identification. Wildlife cameras were installed in the area to monitor for the attacking bear's return and document its ongoing behavior. Alaska State Trooper investigators worked through the night interviewing witnesses, documenting injuries, and coordinating with multiple agencies involved in the response and investigation. Sergeant O'Brien, despite his own exhaustion from the intense emergency response, continued coordination efforts to ensure all aspects of the incident were properly documented and all required notifications were completed. The bear responsible for the attack was never located despite extensive search efforts by fish and game personnel using helicopters, tracking dogs, and ground teams. The animal's behavior following the attack appeared to return to normal patterns, with no additional aggressive encounters or unusual activity reported in the region. Wildlife biologists theorized that the attack may have been triggered by territorial behavior, surprise encounter dynamics, or individual behavioral abnormalities that did not represent ongoing threats to human safety. Saturday, August 3rd, began with continued medical treatment for injured passengers and ongoing investigation efforts by multiple agencies. The 3 patients treated in Anchorage remained in serious but stable condition, while those treated in Kodiak showed positive responses to initial treatment and appeared to be avoiding immediate complications from their injuries. Dr. Abrahamson underwent additional surgery to address concerns about infection and ensure proper healing of the extensive tissue damage in her leg and hip. The medical team's aggressive approach to cleaning and treating the contaminated wounds appeared successful, though her recovery would require weeks of hospitalization followed by months of rehabilitation and physical therapy. Dorothy Morrison's condition remained stable following her overnight surgery, though her age and the severity of her injuries created ongoing concerns about potential complications. Her husband, James, remained at the hospital in Anchorage, supported by family members who had traveled from the lower 48 to provide assistance during the difficult recovery period. Margaret Hendricks's facial reconstruction surgery had been successful in addressing immediate structural damage, though additional procedures would be required to restore full function and appearance. The psychological impact of facial injuries added complexity to her recovery process, requiring specialized counseling and support services to address body image concerns and trauma-related stress. In Kodiak, the moderately injured passengers continued their recovery with positive responses to initial treatment. Dr. Wolf's back and shoulder injuries were healing appropriately, though she would require several weeks of restricted activity and ongoing monitoring for complications. Her scientific background and knowledge of bear behavior made her a valuable resource for investigators, despite her status as a victim of the attack. Carlos Martinez's hand and arm injuries were responding well to treatment, allowing him to participate more actively in caring for his family and communicating with medical staff through interpreters. The Martinez family's resilience and mutual support impressed hospital staff and other patients, demonstrating the strength that would be necessary for full recovery from the traumatic experience. Jennifer Walsh's recovery progressed smoothly, with her shoulder and back injuries showing appropriate healing responses to surgical treatment. Her relationship with David Chen was strengthened by their shared experience and mutual support during the recovery process, leading to their engagement several months after returning to San Francisco. The investigation into the bear attack expanded to include multiple areas of inquiry: the specific circumstances that led to the aggressive encounter, the individual bear's behavioral history and current status, the effectiveness of emergency response procedures, and the adequacy of current safety protocols for wilderness tour operations. Each area of investigation involved different agencies and expertise, requiring careful coordination to ensure comprehensive analysis. Fish and game biologists focused on understanding the attacking bear's behavior and determining whether management actions were necessary to prevent future incidents. DNA analysis of tissue samples collected from the bus confirmed that the attacking animal was a mature, male brown bear with no previous record of human conflict, suggesting that the incident represented abnormal behavior rather than a pattern of aggression. Alaska State Troopers conducted criminal investigation to determine whether any violations of safety regulations or professional standards had contributed to the incident. Their investigation concluded that guide Matthew Carter had followed all established protocols and that the attack represented an unforeseeable wildlife encounter rather than negligence or inadequate safety measures. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, initiated investigation of workplace safety issues related to tour guide operations and employee protection during wildlife encounters. Their review would lead to enhanced safety requirements for tour operators and improved training standards for guides working in areas with dangerous wildlife. Insurance investigators representing multiple carriers began complex analysis of liability issues, property damage claims, and personal injury compensation for affected passengers. The unprecedented nature of the incident created challenging questions about coverage, responsibility, and appropriate compensation for various types of damages resulting from the attack. Media coverage of the attack continued to expand, with national news organizations sending reporters to Kodiak and Anchorage to cover the story and interview participants. The dramatic nature of the incident and availability of video footage created intense public interest that would continue for weeks as the investigation progressed and injured passengers recovered. Tourism industry leaders worked to address public concern about safety in Alaska wilderness areas, while emphasizing the statistical rarity of bear attacks and the overall safety record of professional tour operators. The incident prompted industry-wide review of safety protocols and emergency response procedures, leading to enhanced standards that would benefit all wilderness tour operations. Wildlife advocacy organizations used the incident to promote education about bear behavior and the importance of coexistence between humans and large carnivores in shared habitats. The attack provided a high-profile case study for discussion of wildlife management policies, habitat preservation, and responsible wilderness recreation practices. Sunday, August 4th, marked the beginning of recovery and reflection for all parties involved in the bear attack incident. Medical treatment continued for injured passengers, with encouraging progress reported for most patients. The most seriously injured individuals remained hospitalized, but were showing positive responses to treatment and appeared to be avoiding major complications. Dr. Abrahamson's condition was upgraded from serious to fair following successful treatment of her leg and hip injuries. While her recovery would require extensive rehabilitation, medical specialists were optimistic about her long-term prognosis and eventual return to her cardiology practice. Her experience as a physician helped her understand and cope with the medical aspects of her recovery, though the psychological trauma would require ongoing professional support. Dorothy Morrison's recovery continued to progress despite the challenges presented by her age and the severity of her injuries. Family members provided constant support and encouragement, while medical staff worked to prevent complications and promote healing. The elderly woman's determination and positive attitude impressed caregivers and contributed to her better-than-expected recovery trajectory. Margaret Hendricks began the long process of facial healing and psychological adjustment following her reconstructive surgery. The initial surgical results were encouraging, though additional procedures would be necessary to restore full function and appearance. Her husband, Captain Hendricks, continued to provide unwavering support while dealing with his own emotional trauma from witnessing the attack. The investigation into the bear attack continued with detailed analysis of the incident scene and extensive interviews with all participants. Investigators worked to understand the sequence of events that led to the encounter and the factors that may have triggered the bear's aggressive behavior. The comprehensive investigation would provide valuable insights for improving wilderness safety protocols. Fish and game biologists completed installation of monitoring equipment in the attack area and began systematic tracking efforts to locate and assess the behavior of the attacking bear. The extensive search involved helicopter overflights, ground teams with tracking dogs, and coordination with local guides and residents who might observe unusual bear activity in the region. Alaska State Trooper investigators compiled detailed reports on the incident, including witness statements, medical records, and expert analysis of the attack sequence. Their investigation confirmed that all safety protocols had been followed and that the incident represented an unforeseeable wildlife encounter rather than preventable negligence or safety violations. Tourism industry leaders continued efforts to address public concern about wilderness safety while maintaining support for Alaska's vital tourism economy. Industry associations worked with government agencies to develop enhanced safety standards and improved emergency response procedures that would reduce risks for future tour operations. Media coverage began to focus on recovery efforts and lessons learned from the incident, moving beyond initial sensational reporting to more substantive analysis of wilderness safety issues. Interviews with injured passengers, their families, and medical caregivers provided human interest perspectives on the long-term impact of the attack. Educational institutions and wildlife organizations began incorporating the Kodiak bear attack into training programs and educational materials about human-wildlife interactions. The incident provided a vivid case study for discussion of bear behavior, wilderness safety, and emergency response procedures in outdoor recreation and wildlife management curricula. Monday, August 5th, brought continued progress in medical treatment and investigation efforts. Most injured passengers were showing positive responses to treatment, with several expected to be discharged from the hospital within days. The most seriously injured individuals remained hospitalized but were demonstrating encouraging signs of recovery. Hospital staff in both Kodiak and Anchorage had developed expertise in treating bear attack injuries through their experience with the incident, creating valuable medical knowledge that would benefit future patients with similar traumatic injuries. The unusual nature of the wounds and the circumstances of the attack provided learning opportunities for medical professionals throughout Alaska. Psychological support services were expanded to address the ongoing emotional trauma experienced by attack victims, their families, and emergency responders who had participated in the rescue and treatment efforts. The incident's impact extended far beyond the direct participants to include family members, medical caregivers, and community members affected by the dramatic event. The investigation continued to focus on understanding the attacking bear's behavior and determining appropriate management responses. Wildlife biologists analyzed the incident in the context of broader research on brown bear behavior and human-wildlife interactions, seeking insights that could prevent similar occurrences in the future. Legal proceedings began as injured passengers consulted with attorneys about potential compensation claims and liability issues related to the attack. The complex legal questions surrounding wildlife encounters, tour operator responsibilities, and insurance coverage would require months or years to resolve through negotiation and possible litigation. Tourism industry response included development of enhanced safety protocols, improved guide training requirements, and upgraded emergency response procedures for wilderness tour operations throughout Alaska. The incident prompted industry-wide review of existing practices and implementation of new standards designed to improve safety for guides and passengers. Community response in Kodiak included increased awareness of bear safety issues and enhanced support for attack victims and their families. Local residents with experience in wilderness activities offered assistance and expertise to help with recovery efforts and ongoing investigation of the incident. The week following the bear attack marked a transition from immediate crisis response to longer-term recovery and analysis efforts. Medical treatment continued for injured passengers, with encouraging progress reported for most individuals. The comprehensive investigation expanded to include detailed analysis of bear behavior, emergency response effectiveness, and industry safety standards. Dr. Patricia Wolf was discharged from Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center on Tuesday, August 6th, with instructions for continued care and follow-up treatment of her back and shoulder injuries. Her recovery would require several weeks of restricted activity and physical therapy, though medical specialists were optimistic about her long-term prognosis and eventual return to her research activities. Jennifer Walsh and Carlos Martinez were also discharged during the week, both showing excellent responses to surgical treatment of their injuries. Their recovery processes would continue with outpatient medical care and ongoing psychological support to address trauma-related stress and anxiety resulting from their experience in the bear attack. The Martinez family prepared to return to Arizona with continued medical support and follow-up care arranged in Phoenix. The children's recovery from their psychological trauma would require ongoing counseling and support services, though their resilience and family support system provided encouragement for successful long-term adjustment. David Chen remained in Kodiak to support Jennifer during her initial recovery and to assist investigators with analysis of the video footage he had captured during the attack. His documentation of the incident provided valuable evidence for understanding the bear's behavior and the sequence of events that led to the encounter. In Anchorage, the three most seriously injured passengers continued their recovery, with encouraging progress reported for all three individuals. Dr. Abrahamson's leg and hip injuries were healing appropriately. Dorothy Morrison's arm and shoulder trauma was responding well to treatment, and Margaret Hendricks's facial reconstruction was proceeding as planned. The investigation into the bear attack continued with expanded efforts to locate and monitor the attacking animal. Fish and game biologists used DNA analysis results to confirm the identity of the attacking bear and implemented comprehensive monitoring protocols to track its ongoing behavior and assess potential risks to human safety. Alaska State Trooper investigation concluded with determination that the incident represented an unforeseeable wildlife encounter and that all safety protocols had been properly followed by guide Matthew Carter and Kodiak Wilderness Adventures. The investigation's findings would influence future policy development and safety standard implementation throughout the tourism industry. Media coverage of the incident began to focus on recovery stories and lessons learned, with several injured passengers agreeing to interviews about their experiences and recovery processes. The ongoing coverage helped maintain public awareness of wilderness safety issues, while providing positive examples of resilience and recovery following traumatic experiences. Educational and training organizations incorporated the Kodiak Bear attack into curriculum and professional development programs for wilderness guides, emergency responders, and wildlife managers. The incident provided valuable case study material for training programs focused on human-wildlife conflict prevention and emergency response procedures. 2 weeks after the attack, most participants had returned to their home communities to continue recovery and adjustment to their post-incident lives. The physical injuries sustained during the attack were healing appropriately for most individuals, though psychological recovery would require ongoing support and professional intervention for months or years. Dr. Helena Abrahamson returned to Seattle on August 14th, continuing her recovery through outpatient medical care and rehabilitation services. Her cardiology practice was temporarily covered by colleagues while she focused on physical and emotional recovery from her traumatic experience. The attack had profoundly affected her perspective on risk, safety, and the unpredictable nature of wilderness environments. Dorothy and James Morrison returned to their Homer residence on August 16th, supported by family members who provided assistance with daily activities during Dorothy's recovery from her arm and shoulder injuries. The elderly couple's relationship had been strengthened by their shared experience and mutual support during the crisis, though both continued to struggle with anxiety and trauma-related stress. Margaret and Captain Hendricks returned to their home community on August 18th, beginning the long process of facial healing and psychological adjustment following Margaret's reconstructive surgery. Additional surgical procedures would be required over several months to restore full function and appearance, while psychological counseling helped address trauma and body image concerns. The Martinez family had returned to Phoenix by August 12th, with continued medical follow-up and family counseling services arranged through their local healthcare system. The children's adjustment to normal activities proceeded gradually, with school counselors and child psychologists providing specialized support for trauma recovery. Dr. Patricia Wolfe returned to her research position at the University of Washington on August 20th, though with restricted duties while recovering from her back and shoulder injuries. Her experience as both victim and scientific expert on bear behavior provided unique perspectives on the incident and valuable insights for future research and safety protocol development. Jennifer Walsh and David Chen returned to San Francisco on August 15th, both continuing outpatient medical care and counseling services to address their physical and emotional recovery needs. Their shared experience had strengthened their relationship, leading to their engagement announcement in September and wedding plans for the following year. Guide Matthew Carter resumed work with Kodiak Wilderness Adventures in September, following completion of enhanced safety training and psychological counseling to address his own trauma from the incident. His professional reputation had been enhanced by his calm performance during the crisis, leading to recognition from industry organizations and increased demand for his guiding services. The investigation into the bear attack was completed in October 2025, with comprehensive reports issued by Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Alaska State Troopers, and federal agencies involved in the inquiry. The investigation's findings confirmed that the incident represented abnormal behavior by an individual animal and did not indicate broader threats to human safety from brown bears in the region. The attacking bear was never located despite extensive search efforts, and no additional aggressive encounters were reported in the area following the incident. Wildlife biologists concluded that the animal had likely returned to normal behavioral patterns and did not represent ongoing risks to human safety. Monitoring efforts continued for several months before being discontinued due to lack of concerning activity. Legal proceedings related to the attack were resolved through negotiated settlements between injured passengers and various insurance carriers, avoiding lengthy litigation while providing appropriate compensation for medical expenses, lost income, and pain and suffering. The settlements established precedents for handling similar wildlife encounter claims in the future. Tourism industry changes resulting from the incident included enhanced safety protocols, improved guide training requirements, upgraded emergency response procedures, and increased insurance coverage for wilderness tour operations. These improvements benefited the entire industry while helping prevent similar incidents through better preparation and response capabilities. The one-year anniversary of the Kodiak Bear attack was marked by reunion activities among the survivors, continued advocacy for wilderness safety improvements, and ongoing research into human-wildlife conflict prevention. The incident's impact had extended far beyond the immediate participants to influence policy, practice, and public awareness of wilderness recreation risks and safety measures. Educational institutions continued to use the incident as a case study in wilderness safety, emergency response, and human-wildlife interaction courses. The comprehensive documentation of the attack, response, and recovery provided valuable learning opportunities for students and professionals in related fields. Research organizations incorporated lessons learned from the incident into ongoing studies of bear behavior, human-wildlife conflict, and wilderness recreation safety. The attack had provided unique insights into brown bear behavior and the effectiveness of various safety measures and emergency response procedures. The long-term impact of the Kodiak Bear attack extended beyond the immediate participants to influence wilderness recreation practices, safety standards, and public policy throughout North America. The incident served as a catalyst for improvements in guide training, emergency preparedness, and wildlife management that continued to benefit wilderness recreationists and tour operators years after the original event. Survivors of the attack continued their recovery processes with varying degrees of success in overcoming the physical and psychological trauma they had experienced. Most individuals achieved full physical recovery within a year of the incident, though psychological effects persisted longer for many participants and required ongoing professional support. The incident's legacy includes enhanced safety awareness among wilderness recreationists, improved emergency response capabilities in remote areas, better understanding of brown bear behavior and human-wildlife interaction dynamics, and strengthened support systems for trauma recovery following wildlife encounters. 5 years after the Kodiak Bear attack, participants reflected on how the experience had changed their lives, relationships, and perspectives on wilderness recreation and personal risk assessment. While the traumatic nature of the incident continued to affect their lives, many survivors had found positive meaning in their experience through advocacy work, educational activities, and enhanced appreciation for life's precious and unpredictable nature. The comprehensive response to the Kodiak Bear attack demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated emergency services, the resilience of human beings facing extreme adversity, and the importance of continuous improvement in wilderness safety practices and emergency preparedness procedures.